first we look back at the events of the last few months which have led up to tonight.
August 9th, just after noon, Mike Brown was walking in the middle of West Florissant Avenue when Officer Darren Wilson approached Brown and his friend. Moments later, Wilson would end up shooting the 18-year-old just outside the Canfield apartments. Tensions rose as Brown's body lay in the street for hours.
We would come to learn the Ferguson Police Department was waiting on assistance from St. Louis County Police and the coroner. County officers had spent the day in South County dealing with a gunman inside St. Anthony's Hospital.
An armed intruder, armed with a handgun. He was also wearing a ski mask.
Meanwhile, back in Ferguson, hundreds gathered along the streets of Canfield throughout the evening and into Sunday, all while tensions mounted. The next day, police hold a press conference and announced Brown attacked Wilson before he was fatally shot.
Within the police car, there was a struggle over the officer's weapon. There was at least one shot fired within the car.
That night, a peaceful vigil turned violent, followed by violent night after violent night.
Don't be a traitor to Michael Brown in the name of you, man.
By August 11th, national civil rights leaders, including the Reverend Al Sharpton, were in town to meet with Brown's family.
It was Thursday, August 14th, when President Obama addressed the nation on the events in Ferguson.
There is never an excuse for violence against police or for those who would use this tragedy as a cover for vandalism or looting. There's also no excuse for police to use excessive force against peaceful protests.
Meanwhile, the protests continue. Governor Nixon announces a change to the security detail. Captain Ron Johnson of the Highway Patrol is now the man in charge.
I plan on tonight myself walking to the quick trip that has been called Ground Zero and meeting with the folks there myself tonight. And so we are going to have a different approach and have the approach that we're in this together.
But the following day, August 15th, tensions rise again. Ferguson police released the name of Officer Wilson, but not before also releasing the images of Mike Brown involved in a robbery just minutes before the shooting.
It pissed them off. It pissed them off, and for one reason it did, because it muddied the water.
On Saturday, August 16th, Governor Nixon declares a state of emergency. The National Guard arrives Monday. Tensions mount again as St. Louis police shoot and kill a man armed with a knife just a few miles from Ferguson.
He got his gun out.
Almost a week after the president's national address on Ferguson, U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder arrives in St. Louis. He's briefed on the federal investigations in the shooting of Mike Brown.
And if we get community involvement, we can turn it around, allow people to express themselves, as that's what we do in the United States.
Tensions and protests start to ease before Brown is laid to rest on Monday, August 25th.
This is about justice. This is about fairness.
Since Michael Brown's funeral, we've seen protests inside St. Louis County government.
If Darren Wilson get off this case, y'all better bring out every army in the city, because it's going down.
Angry mobs gathering in the Shaw neighborhood after an off-duty St. Louis officer shot and killed an armed teenager.
What you doing here, bro? Get the f*** out of here, man, with your coward boys. With your coward terrorists, get the f*** out of here.
And continued calls for a decision from the grand jury.
This is different. This is being handled differently than most cases,
which for the past months have only been hearing evidence on this case.
News 4 is covering breaking news.
We continue following a very hostile breaking news situation. There is outrage tonight from those reacting to a Ferguson police officer shooting and killing an 18-year-old. The community is flooding the streets of North County demanding answers. News 4 has team coverage with two crews following the developments. We begin with News 4's Brittany Noble, who's live at West Florissant in Canfield, where the teenager was killed. What kind of reaction have you seen tonight, Brittany?
Well, Chris, the situation here continues to change. As day became night, more and more people became frustrated with police about what happened to an 18-year-old boy named Mike from Normandy. Now, there were hundreds of people standing in this area earlier today. I was here too. Police eventually cleared the scene. My photographer and I turned down Canfield. It's right there in that intersection, hoping to talk with more people. We quickly left because there was a dumpster fire. Now, since then, we've seen multiple police cars going in and out of that neighborhood that we were just in. County Councilwoman Hazel Irby was also there and shocked by the scene.
Be honest, how bad is it right now?
I think it's very bad. There's a large crowd over there. And I think that you see the police are going back and forth over there continuously. So it's not going to die down soon. Something has to be done. We need the investigation, a quick investigation.
There are lots of county police cars here, but it is the job of Ferguson to control the crowds in the neighborhoods. So I did speak with the chief of Ferguson, the police chief, and you can hear what he has to say coming up about how he plans to calm everybody down. But first, the details of the shooting are still very unclear, but the situation has many people from Ferguson, from the Ferguson neighborhood, beyond angry. News 4 Corey Stark has been talking with people and witnesses who saw it all happen. He's live from the St. Louis County Police Headquarters. Corey?
Yeah, Brittany, well, as you showed us, this shooting, this situation has sent a shockwave through an entire community. Now, earlier, Ferguson police did confirm that one of their officers did shoot and kill the teenager, as you mentioned, named Mike. Now, the big question, of course, is why. The St. Louis County Police Department is the one handling that part of the investigation. Meanwhile, dozens of people who saw this shooting happen, they say this officer acted unjustly.
We wasn't causing any harm to nobody. We had no weapons on us at all.
Dorian Johnson says he was walking home from a convenience store with his friend Mike Brown. They were walking on the street when a Ferguson police officer from his vehicle told the boys to get out of the street. Johnson says they kept walking, causing the officer to confront the boys, first from his car, then got out of the car, firing a shot. Johnson says him and Brown were scared and ran away from the officer.
He shot again, and once my friend felt that shot, he turned around and he put his hands in the air, and he started to get down, but the officer still approached with his weapon drawn, and he fired several more shots.
No justice, no peace.
Instantly, hundreds gathered, angered and saddened by what they call a complete overreaction by the officer. Now a family is demanding answers.
You took my son away from me. You know how hard it was for me to get him to stay in school and graduate? You know how many black men graduate? Not many. Because you bring them down to this type of level where they feel like I don't got nothing to live for anyway. They're gonna try to take me out anyway.
The crowd became more angered, even someone firing shots. No one was hurt. Meanwhile, Brown's body laid in the street for hours.
The shots that were being fired were very close to that scene, so we needed to make sure that the crime scene was safe. That's why we called for the additional officers so that we could safely, without conflict, move everyone back far enough.
Ferguson Police Chief Tom Jackson says the St. Louis County Police Department is handling the investigation into the officer shooting and says as standard procedure, the officer has been put on paid administrative leave.
We do want this investigated fully, and that's why we asked for the outside help to do that.
And as you saw in that video, this all happened in the middle of a very busy apartment complex with a lot of witnesses. We understand that police do have cell phone videos from several witnesses that could be a part of this investigation, once again being handled by the St. Louis County Police Department. We'll continue to monitor this situation throughout the night, have the very latest on News 4 this morning, and of course, later on in this show. Chris, we'll send it back to you.
On West Florissant, dozens of police agencies have descended upon the area. News 4 has live team coverage tonight of the mob scene on West Florissant near Canfield. News 4's Brittany Noble in the middle as the violence began. Brittany.
Well, Sharon, I was on West Florissant and Canfield, but my photographer Alonzo and I had to get out of the area. While shooting interviews and video, we found out our window had been broken into. Not just this window, but there was also a window in the back of our live truck. So again, we got out of there concerned for our safety, but we were there at the beginning of that vigil on Canfield and again, West Florissant. There were thousands of people marching. Then the crowd became violent. People started surrounding police cars, hoping to intimidate officers who eventually drove away. I did speak with a 13-year-old Aja Blackwell. She lives in that neighborhood, and she simply told me she was scared. What are you seeing? You said you're scared. What are you seeing?
I'm seeing people doing stuff like breaking into stores and stuff and just doing bad stuff.
What stores did they break into?
Quick Trip.
What did they take out? Did you see them run out with anything?
Everything. They destroy everything.
You're saying that people are getting disruptive. What was happening?
Well, you know, it's not the family, because I'm part of the family. But the people up there started throwing bottles. They caused the police to come down here. It was supposed to be peaceful. That's not peaceful, throwing bottles and beer cans and stuff like that.
I've been reaching out to the Ferguson police chief. He has been helpful all weekend long with News 4. I want to know his plans to control the crowd, so I will continue to have updates online and on air. KMOV.com. Live in North County, Brittany Noble, News 4.
Now, all of the chaos incited by the officer-involved shooting that claimed the life of this young man. He has a name. It is trending around the country tonight. 18-year-old Mike Brown, the unarmed teen shot and killed by Ferguson police. We have reporters throughout the Ferguson area. More video just sent into our newsroom of the scene in Ferguson. Hundreds of people flooding the streets. Police desperate to gain control here. Now, the situation has indeed escalated. Many had feared exactly this. Our Julian Johnson is live from a parking lot in Ferguson. Julian.
And Sharon, this is all at the intersection of Lucas and Hunt and West Florissant. Police have this intersection shut down in this area. We're still trying to figure out if this is a proactive move or a reactive move to some of the violent demonstrations that we've seen out here. I want to bring in Darlene Kahn. Darlene, you said you were a part of some of the protests today that were expected to be nonviolent. Tell me a little bit about how things made a turn for the worst.
I really don't know how it got worse. We were actually up in Canfield for the candlelight vigil, and it was very nice. It was thousands and thousands. It was about a little bit over 1,000 people maybe there, and it was really nice. So they started marching down West Florissant, and I really don't know what happened. I was at the end of the group, but I don't know. I think what I'm hearing or what I heard at the back was the police started shooting bullets and people just started running. People just started running and things just got chaotic from there.
You said you saw about 1,000 people rush forward?
Yeah, the people that were marching just turned around all of a sudden and started running back. You know, at first I thought the police were coming after us, but I think it was just the police maybe shooting rubber bullets to scare the crowd. So everybody just started running. There were kids getting, stepped on, just massive amount of people running. And
you said they were also throwing bottles and stuff like that?
Well, no, they went to the Quick Trip. A group of kids went to the Quick Trip and just started tearing up the Quick Trip, and the police just started speeding up and down and with the bullets, and it was bad. It started out to be a peaceful protest, and it got bad.
Julian Johnson has been outside of the Ferguson Police Department all day, and Julian breaks down exactly where this investigation stands right now.
With the investigation still very much in its initial phase, St. Louis County Police Chief John Belmar says he could only give limited information about a police shooting that left a teen dead and a community outraged.
They're only the scene one time, and there were a lot of folks down there. Their emotions were running very high.
At a Sunday morning press conference, Belmar described how 18-year-old Michael Brown and the unnamed Ferguson police officer got in a struggle over the officer's gun. At least one shot was fired inside the car. When Brown tried running off, officials say the officer hopped out and fired on the teen, who did not have any weapon.
There were more than a few shell casings recovered. I cannot say at this time how many times the subject was struck. by gunfire. It's hard to know. It was more than just a couple.
We've learned the officer at the center of all this is a 6-year veteran of Ferguson PD. The department is letting St. Louis County lead the investigation, a move Chief Belmar commends.
I would not imagine that anybody would do that if they felt like they had anything to hide or in fact did not want the investigation to be looked at independently.
Investigators are also calling for anyone with video of the incident to contact them, since Ferguson police cars do not have dash cameras. All findings will then head to county prosecutor's office for any potential criminal charges.
Now, protesters say they will be here yet again tomorrow morning at the scene, 10 a.m. There will also be another press conference with police giving us the latest details. Of course, we'll have both covered for you. I went to the family home of Mike Brown late this afternoon before they faced the rest of the media at a press conference. His parents agreed to speak to me exclusively about who Mike Brown was, a son with dreams, goals, and a family who loved him dearly.
He's a smart kid, he make you laugh. He just graduated from high school. He's on his way to Peabody, take up heating and cooling.
Michael Brown Sr. says the world was just getting to know his son, a child he helped raise alongside Mike's mother, Leslie McSpadden. Raising Mike was done with a combination of love and strength.
You talked about how difficult this journey was, getting him to the point of college.
Man, it was rough. Because I just kept my foot in his neck. Me and his mom, kept our foot in his neck. And he got through it.
Now, two parents grieving, desperate for answers, are troubled by so much of what they see.
Are you concerned that he's been forgotten in some of this?
Yes, because the actions that's going on now, it's pushing my son out the picture. It's too much negativity that's going on. I need y'all support. I need the world's support right now. We need y'all support.
Now, as we said, today would have been Mike's first day of college classes at Peabody. Instead, two parents who say they will get justice are now planning their son's funeral.
News 4 is covering breaking news.
As darkness set in, violence began. You're looking at the third night of intense scenes in Ferguson as News 4 continues to watch over our community.
Now, there hasn't been a moment today where we've stopped monitoring this unprecedented situation.
Yeah, from the very first thing this morning, we assessed the damage from last night. We followed up with business owners in the Ferguson area, spoke with family members of Michael Brown, and followed reports of violence as it intensified.
Julian Johnson on West Florissant right now. And Julian, bring us up to date.
Well, Sharon, crowds once again quickly got out of control tonight. Take a look at this video. It shows officers using tear gas on those crowds that were blocking streets and overall just getting rowdy. And then back out here live, you'll see down West Florissant where there's a heavy police presence near that burned QT. There were huge crowds near that intersection earlier today, and because there's another night of chaos in Ferguson, some residents now want the National Guard to step in. Loud bangs echoing throughout Ferguson Tuesday night as officers forced to use tear gas to control crowds, which at times seemed uncontrollable.
We heard gunshots, sirens, chaos.
Lori Salomon has lived in Ferguson more than 30 years and says last night's raids were unlike anything she's ever seen, so she's making a plea.
We feel for all households and all safety for all of our families. We want the National Guard to be brought in. We cannot afford to go through another night of what we went through.
And with scenes of widespread looting and shootings, some residents agree, while others think National Guard presence will only make things worse.
Who's going to receive it? I mean, force is all around us. What has it done? But the trust factor, again, we can't get away from that.
Salomon says she's contacted the governor's office. If no change comes, she's ready to at least temporarily abandon the only place she's called home.
This is here, St. Charles. Sorry, we'll stay here.
So we've seen a steady flow of people out here along West Florissant. Officers are trying to push people back out, but we've seen people park nearby and start to walk down the street. We have not heard, though, any more tear gas being launched at those crowds. Out here, there's still plenty more developments to bring you. As we hear more breaking news happen out here, we will definitely bring that to you. Tonight, we're live in Ferguson. Julian Johnson, News 4.
And after a public call to action in downtown St. Louis this afternoon, tonight, Reverend Al Sharpton and Michael Brown's mother and father together again for a rally at St. Mark's Family Church in Ferguson. Our Matt Cesney right there as the gathering unfolded.
Yeah, Sharon, that rally just ended about 40 minutes ago here in Delwood, just beyond the line of Ferguson. It was an emotional rally with calls for justice and to end the violence.
Justice!
The Reverend Al Sharpton led the rally inside a packed church and talking to the crowd about the police.
We're not even saying most are bad, but those that are bad, you got to deal with just like we deal with those in our community that's bad.
Also there inside was the family of Michael Brown, a cousin of Brown's, making a passion plea for peace.
All of the violence and the looting that has transpired over the past couple of days, we would ask any folks who are out there that had participated or that are thinking about participating in the future that you cease immediately.
Even as calls for peace are made, St. Louisans are now feeling fear, flocking to gun stores to arm themselves.
The current events have pushed me to get on the ball and get it done.
You want to feel safe?
Obviously, yes. I want to be able to protect myself and my family.
We've got a lot of people coming in scared to death, literally. They feel that the fire's too close to home.
Right. And the owner of Metro Shooting in Bridgeton tells me that he has sold nearly 100 guns in the last 2 days, many of them, he says, to residents in Ferguson who don't feel safe. Even as we speak tonight, many people from the rally have spilled out onto the street now on Chambers. They're demonstrating, drivers honking horns. It looks to be a noisy night at the very least here. We're live in Delwood. Matt Cesney, News 4.
Back to Reverend Sharpton. The anti-violence message from him, it was consistent all day. He called for an end to all looting, like at this shoe carnival in Gravois Plaza. Police say 10 carloads of people smashed the windows, grabbing everything they could. St. Louis Board of Aldermen President Louis Reed told me these are opportunists trying to take advantage of the Mike Brown shooting.
Clear lines were drawn in terms of a clear distinction between Michael Brown, his family, and what's happening with the looting and the theft.
All right, so there's that clear line. What can be done within this city?
Well, I think part of, if it's not profitable at the end of the day and people continue to get caught and held accountable, then they will stop.
Reed says police need to address these cases like any other crime in the city.
Sharon, new at 6. Last year, community activists predicted that some of our most troubled neighborhoods were on the edge of lawlessness. That's because the communities had been neglected and oppressed for so many years. News 4 Investigates Craig Cheatham was told that all that would take was an event that would rip the scab off those deep wounds.
Steve, that event proved to be the deadly police shooting of unarmed black teenager Mike Brown. But the neighborhood's distrust of law enforcement and a general feeling of isolation and oppression began long before Mike was killed, and it can be felt in many other mostly poor black communities too. This week, Ferguson has looked like a police state.
It's not funny to us.
The anger.
What we gonna do about tomorrow, sister?
The confrontations. And most of us never saw it coming. But the deep resentment and feelings of isolation and oppression have been there for a very long time.
You can read about things in the paper, but it means nothing to you if you don't live there and understand the outcry.
Right now, our neighborhoods are war zones like never before.
A year ago, James Clark, a vice president of Better Family Life, told me decades of neglect in some of our most vulnerable communities was creating so much anger and unrest that if it wasn't addressed, it could explode, just like what happened in Ferguson.
And our young people are becoming more and more brazen. So we've got to get very, very serious, or we will see St. Louis almost come to a state of lawlessness.
It's a 45 and it's in between your eyes.
Some of it is based on the way people, especially African Americans, are treated by some cops. Like this example in Brooklyn, Illinois, captured by a camera on a local officer.
Like a airplane. Go ahead and cuff him.
In Ferguson and many other communities, police are far more likely to pull over black drivers and search them, even though a report by the Missouri Attorney General's office says whites are more likely to have drugs on them.
They killed my baby boy.
During our investigations over the last decade, many residents in some of the region's poorest and most violent neighborhoods have told us they don't trust the police.
Police won't do nothing. Come on now. But they say they still looking for them. You're not looking for them.
And that the cops often treat them with little respect.
3 of my sons has been shot.
Kimberly Schooler's 21-year-old son Jordan was shot and killed in East St. Louis. But despite that, she refuses to cooperate with police on any other case. If you knew who shot somebody, you wouldn't tell the police?
No, because they're not going to do nothing. So you put your own life in danger because they're not going to protect you. They don't care nothing about you.
That belief doesn't reflect the view of all residents, but it does echo the lack of trust in law enforcement and the fear of some of her neighbors. During our documentary, A Vicious Cycle, we explored the pushback toward cops. Terrell Golson, who died since our interview, was a former gang leader and enforcer.
20 years ago, you'd be running and trying to hide and all that from the police. Yeah, back then you would.
Not today.
No, today is what it is, you know what I'm saying? You up yours, I'm up mine, we're gonna see who get the first draw, you know?
But that's only part of the problems in the areas James Clark talked about.
No one feels safe today.
When you combine that with extreme poverty, high unemployment, low percentages of home ownership, and single-parent families that move frequently, creating even more instability, and then add racial segregation and the feeling by a race of people that they are isolated, you have an environment that is stressful and broken to a degree that many of us can't imagine unless we live there and experience it every day.
We can either sit back and continue to watch our society spiral out of control, or we can say, let's get smart about it and let's begin to do things differently, because the way that we do things today is not working.
Another factor at play in Ferguson, an overwhelmingly white police force in a city that is mostly black. Researchers say when all of those factors interact, the situation can become volatile and greatly increases the chances of violence in a community. Craig Cheatham, News 4.
Racial tensions on the rise.
What we gonna do about tomorrow, sister?
How did we get here?
We wasn't causing any harm to nobody. We had no weapons on us at all.
A young man, Michael Brown, was shot and killed by a Ferguson police officer.
You took my son away from me. You know how hard it was for me to get him to stay in school and graduate?
Tensions rise as Brown's body lay there for hours.
So we needed to make sure that the crime scene was safe.
No justice, no peace.
Protests began.
These Democrats have got to go. Hey, hey.
A peaceful vigil turns violent.
You said you're scared. What are you seeing?
I'm seeing people doing stuff like breaking into stores and stuff and just doing bad stuff.
What stores did they break into?
Quick Trip.
What did they take out? Did you see them run out with anything?
Everything. They destroy everything.
There has been no rush to judgment on this case.
We gotta be out here with the people if we want some justice.
As darkness set, violence began again.
Lock him up! Justice! Lock him up now! Don't be a traitor to Michael Brown in the name of you, man. No justice!
And another officer-involved shooting.
Instead of burning bridges in anger, we must rebuild them with love.
Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Sharon Reed.
And I'm Steve Savard. We're here inside Studio B at KMOV tonight, and we just want to talk.
We do. So much of what we've seen in our community is jarring. It's a lot to take in. So tonight, a candid conversation, one with no boundaries.
Our guests tonight have varying viewpoints. They have different experiences and different perspectives. They're all here tonight
to have a community conversation.
So let's get right to it. Introducing our guest, Chief Tom Jackson with the Ferguson Police Department, Esther Haywood with the NAACP, President, St. Louis County, and Bishop Edwin Bass, President, Church of God in Christ Urban Initiatives.
Michael McMillan, CEO and President, Urban League of St. Louis. James Clark, Vice President, Better Family Life Incorporated, and Mayor James Knowles of Ferguson.
Also in our audience, Norm White is an associate professor of criminology and criminal justice at SLU. Mike Fitzgerald from Incarnate Word Foundation. He's on the Youth Violence Prevention Task Force. And of course, our investigative reporter, Craig Cheatham, joins us as well.
We're here tonight because a young man, Michael Brown, was killed on Saturday, and the facts about his death are being sorted out. We all want the truth to come out, and every day since the tragedy, we have had numerous calls for a fair and thorough investigation. Now, we know this. The world will be watching, yet some clearly are skeptical. My first question to our panelists tonight, do any of you doubt that a fair conclusion can be reached through either investigation done by the St. Louis County Police or the FBI? Ms. Haywood?
I truly feel that with the St. Louis County turning it over to the FBI and the Justice Department, along with the effort of St. Louis County, there will be justice.
Anybody else want to chime in?
How about you, Michael?
Well, we definitely agree with that. The Urban League is advocating, along with the NAACP and the Clergy Coalition, for the Justice Department to have exclusive control over the investigation.
If I could follow up with you, Chief. Sure. In many ways, it's protocol to turn this investigation over in a circumstance like this, but how does it make you feel, your department's reputation on the line?
Well, I think it's really important that we do get a fair and factual, truthful conclusion to this investigation. We all want the same thing. We want the truth and we want justice. There would be an appearance of impropriety if I had tried to conduct this investigation myself. As soon as I found out about the shooting, I had contacted Police Chief Belmer and asked him to go to the scene, have his people go to the scene, and take complete control of the investigation. So I'm very, very confident that they will come to the right conclusion.
Are we at more risk in the future based on the investigation's findings, how this turns out, and how do we get ahead of that and minimize any sort of violent reaction some may have in this community? James?
Well, I think that the outcome is going to be very, very important. I think that we must be able to have a fair conclusion, knowing that if the individual is exonerated, that there will be severe backlash. We cannot emphasize that it's a very, very volatile and it's a very, very fluid situation right now. And there are other benchmarks along the way. The young man's funeral is going to be another milestone that we have to be able to effectively mediate as much as we possibly can. So this is a very, very high-pitched, high-profile situation that is right now, for all involved, it's out of control.
Bishop, I know you want to say something, and black churches have been an integral part of this, meeting places, organizing with the protesters. What's really behind, what's at the root of this violence?
Well, let me first make a comment on the last question. If you look at justice as the destination, that's a critical destination, but the journey itself also is very important. So the disclosure of information, the community feeling that all information is readily available to the community, that things are rolling along at appropriate speed, correctly, are all part of resulting in a good end and good destination and good conclusion to this matter.
But Chief, how much information can be made public in an investigation like this? That's the rub here, is it not?
It is the rub, and it's frustrating to me as well. But the thing is, we have a whole bunch of witnesses out there who've come forward and need to be interviewed, and we need to get that information without it being clouded by facts from the case being already out there. So it's happening slowly, and I would really like to to ask the county to put out more information, but they really can't at this point. They will. It'll come out.
We heard from the county prosecutor, Bob McCullough, this afternoon. We took that live, talking about what he could and couldn't do and the process moving forward. A key piece of information that's not out there is the name of the officer. Can you speak to that?
Yes, I can. So first of all, it's Bob McCullough's office policy that they don't release the name of anyone who's being investigated until they're formally charged. But we recognize that this is an important piece of information that needs to come out. What happened right before we were prepared to do that was the name of another officer on my department was released as being the shooter. And he wasn't, but his name went up on Facebook or this other social media websites, and it just was a disaster for him. He started receiving death threats. He had to take his family out of town. So we had to sit down and weigh the benefit to the public and to the media of releasing that information right now, or against the safety of the officer, his family, and his neighbors, the officer who was wrongly identified. And so we did make that decision, of course, with Bob McCullough saying he wasn't going to release the name either. But we made that decision internally that we needed to hold off on that for a little bit.
Well, Mayor, your city's taken a hit nationally. Can you speak to what can be done moving forward?
Well, I think, as mentioned, there's going to be other milestones ahead, and there's going to be sensitivities that arise at each milestone, such as the releasing of the findings of the investigation, releasing of any other pertinent information, and of course this funeral. So I think, though, as we mentioned, we have to be showing that we are making steps, that we are talking, that we're hearing, and we're looking at moving forward as each of those milestones progress, because we don't want people to think that once this subsides that we just turned our back and not doing anything about their concerns. We wanted to let people know that we're hearing what they're saying. We want to engage those people. And we want to start having meaningful dialogue about moving forward. So,
if I can interrupt you, Mayor, what steps specifically? What are you hearing, and what steps?
Well, I mean, I think there's a lot of people who across the nation, there's a divide between young people and law enforcement, especially young African Americans. A lot of times in law enforcement, it's something that we hear about law enforcement not understanding young people, not understanding the community. So we need to look at ways that we can continue to engage those communities with law enforcement, making them feel part of the greater community in Ferguson and across the country, and as well as having more positive interactions with law enforcement, whether it be through school resource officer programs and others. And it's unfortunate, but over the years, especially with education funding dropping, that the first thing to go, besides sports, is school resource officer programs. The city of Ferguson, as Ferguson-Florissant School District, has eliminated those. We have undertaken the funding to make those stay. DARE officers, school resource officers, they help bridge the gap between young people and law enforcement.
Well, we solicited some questions from viewers tonight on both Facebook and also Twitter.
That's right, and Instagram. This is from Travis Ferguson. The one question, he says, that needs an answer is all this violence really the answer to the problem? Is the violence really respecting his memory? And Michael, if you could speak to that.
Well, absolutely not. We all understand the outrage and the disgust that is in the community about this tragedy, and we're dealing with a generation of people that feel hopeless in many ways because of lack of educational opportunities, lack of jobs, lack of good housing, and an overall quality of life that most people enjoy. But violence is not the answer. We have to stop all of the rioting, all of the violence, all of the negativity that has transpired, and pay respect to this young man and let the process continue on in terms of the FBI's investigation. Peaceful protest is what we should be doing, and trying to make sure that we live up to the history of the civil rights movement and paying legacy to his life.
Ms. Haywood, you were nodding your head while Michael was giving that answer, the eloquent answer.
Very much so. Very much.
You echo his thoughts.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But what can be done, Ms. Haywood, to make sure that the violence isn't just quelled, but it doesn't bubble up again and again?
Well, hopefully, we would have to remember that many of the people that are out there are not from the community. Many of them are transplants brought in, sent in, and they hear about it. And I can imagine that opportunity presented itself there wherever it is.
Bishop Bass, you wanted to weigh in?
Yeah, I think also an acknowledgement that despair and frustration does not breed logical behavior. I think we've got an excellent example of that, the alleged suicide of Robin Williams as a result of frustration and despair allegedly caused him to take his life. Obviously an illogical approach. I think if the community would acknowledge that fact, that some people are not going to act in a logical way, and that's probably not unusual. At the same time, we are of the same mind that we're trying to encourage the community to avoid violence and to respect the memory of the young man who was killed by acting appropriately in the community.
We also received questions about the makeup of the Ferguson Police Department. There is a significant disparity between the racial makeup of the community in Ferguson and the Ferguson Police Department.
Would a more racially diverse police force here in Ferguson have made a difference, in your opinion, in the last 2 or 3 days?
I think, of course, it would not have made a difference.
Right now, the Ferguson Police Department has 53 officers, but only 3 are black. Compare that to the data from the latest census, showing 63% of Ferguson is African American. Pastor Spencer Lamar Booker of the St. Paul AME Church met with Chief Jackson Tuesday.
One that is sworn to protect or serve, whether black or white, must be accountable for their action.
There were more minority officers in the past, but they left for better job offers from other departments. Pastor Booker believes a more racially diverse police force would improve relations between the department and the community.
But I believe that with commitment from Chief Jackson and his family, the police officers of this city, it can happen.
We received a question via Twitter on this very topic from Susan Massey. What can Ferguson city leaders do to create more positive relations between all citizens in the community? And Chief Jackson, you and I talked about this just yesterday, and you were very, very candid about the lack of black officers in your department. You had more in the past, lost them to better paying jobs.
I did.
Tell us a little bit about your efforts to change those numbers and to recruit young people.
Well, losing them to better paying jobs, it sparks the discussion about retention. We want to be able to recruit and retain a diverse workforce. So when I got to the Ferguson Police Department 4.5 years ago, in a very short time I promoted the first 2 African American sergeants in the history of the department. And I had and I hired additional African American officers, put one through the academy, and but lost them to better paying jobs. The officers called me and said they'd like to come back, after going to those jobs because they loved working here. But so we were able to, the mayor had a leadership role in this, in raising the starting pay of our police department by 11% last year. We believe this is going to help us in the future to recruit and retain. We also have improved the overall quality of life in the police department by adding better equipment, better training, more training. We're doing improvements to the police station itself. We've gotten improved vehicles. So just the kind of things that make somebody want to come and work for a police department and stay at the police department.
News 4 is covering breaking news.
Stunning images you're not going to see anywhere else coming in from Ferguson within the last hour. We've seen flash bombs, police launching tear gas canisters throughout the area. Another volatile night in Ferguson is unfolding.
It is night 5 of the clashes between police and people on the streets of Ferguson.
Yeah, from the video, you can see and understand how dangerous things have become tonight.
That's right, and we want to tell you that our reporters are embedded in this. Let's take another look and listen to their point of view.
Y'all gonna burn somebody's house down over this shit? Y'all head, y'all.
Our photographer Scott Thomas capturing what's happening on the ground tonight from that astounding perspective behind the lines.
Yeah, he was there, right there, as the blasts of canisters were going off, and Scott Thomas joins us on the phone right now. And Scott, you were embedded in what looked like a dangerous situation. At any point, did you fear for your safety or anyone else's safety around you?
Well, Steve, I tell you, the police here exercised all manner of restraint. They received verbal abuses all day long, and it wasn't until things were actually thrown at them that they took action with tear gas and advanced. Yeah, it is a scary situation when someone's firing projectiles at you, and I managed to be on the upwind side of the tear gas, so I didn't get a lot of effects that way. But this situation was only occurred when bottles or rocks were thrown at the police, and that is when they used tear gas.
Scott, you've been out there for days, really nights now. Have you seen the tension diminish in any way, or does it just keep seeming to escalate?
Well, it seemed like today that things were calming down, and then we had this little flare-up, and it was once again caused by a small percentage of individuals within the group of this protest.
All right, Scott, thank you very much. Scott Thomas, our photographer in the middle of the unrest tonight in Ferguson.
Be prepared. Everybody be prepared.
And more video from West Florissant and Chambers. People wearing masks in protest preparing to be tear gassed. As the sun set in Ferguson, protesters were asked to go home, a request by the city and its chief of police. And judging by what we've seen tonight, that request is being denied. News 4's Corey Stark on West Florissant. And Corey, you were right there where the tear gas canisters were thrown in.
Sharon, that's right, and we've seen a lot of tear gas used tonight, as Julian said, as police try to get these individuals that are out here to go home. And we're on West Florissant now. You can see crowds of people still lingering around, and they've wanted them to come up closer, as I said, north on West Florissant. But you can see the chaos that broke out when the tear gas was used to disperse those crowds. As you mentioned, we were right in the thick of things in the middle of an interview, and the police, is the next thing we know, they were using this tear gas, and we started bolting the other way. You saw hundreds of people that were out there running the other way, and it was only about 5 minutes ago that tear gas started making its way up to where we are right now on West Florissant. Our eyes started watering. We began to cough, so you can only imagine those people that were on the front lines when this tear gas was used. Now, a lot of people we talked to said that it was a peaceful protest, but then the police said that the protesters were getting violent, and this is what one person who was on the front lines had to say to me.
We just said hands up, don't shoot.
Is that all you were saying?
That's all we were saying. Hands up, don't shoot.
Were you in the front line up there?
In the front line, yes. And they just start shooting.
And we've heard that from a lot of people, that they simply were on the front line that say don't shoot. But you heard Scott's account earlier. He was a little closer to that front line where he saw some maybe rocks being thrown at some of the officers. But I did just talk with actually a pastor of a local church who was with 8 members of his church group. They were on the front line as well, and he said that they didn't see anything violent happen. But again, that's what police are saying happened that caused them using this tear gas and dispersing these crowds. Of course, we'll ask police about that as soon as we can. We'll send it back to you guys.
My name is Brian Barksdale. This week I have been through hell. We're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, though.
Police in America are more heavily armed than ever. We've seen it this week in Ferguson, where city streets are smothered in tear gas fired by cops who some say look more like soldiers at war. News 4 investigates. Craig Cheatham went to Ferguson today and questioned police about their tactics.
Sharon, across the country, local cops are using thousands of semi-automatic rifles and armored military vehicles that were made available by the federal government following the 9/11 terrorist attacks. The equipment was supposed to help communities like ours be better prepared to fight the war on terror. But in Ferguson, the terror felt by many people has come from the military-type response, widely blamed for making the situation worse.
You must leave the area. What kind of weapon is that?
They look like soldiers in a war zone.
I've never seen one outside the military.
But they are mostly local cops from St. Louis County.
You must disperse in a peaceful
peaceful manner.
Heavily armed on military vehicles built for battle, firing tear gas and rubber bullets again and again, night after night.
This is North Korea right now, man. They cannot do this. This is not North County anymore.
The so-called militarization of local police began several decades ago with the first SWAT teams. Now hundreds of police departments use them routinely on drug raids and to control large crowds like the ones in Ferguson.
It's a powder keg.
Ferguson Police Chief Tom Jackson says law enforcement is reevaluating its use of this approach and will try to be more responsive to the community, though he defended the repeated use of tear gas.
Let's go. I'm working on it.
And arrests of journalists and nonviolent protesters. Why was it fired? Why did it always seem to be fired around 9 o'clock at night? I mean, take us inside some of those decisions, please.
Well, those decisions were made by the tactical commanders on the ground, and it was based on the threat of violence. If individuals are in a crowd that's attacking the police, they need to get out of that crowd.
You're lucky it wasn't one of them Johnson boys.
They received verbal abuses all day long.
Last night, News 4 photojournalist Scott Thomas reported that the police tactical units showed restraint after being repeatedly taunted by some protesters who were blocking a public road and throwing rocks and bottles at officers. But the images of a war zone in the small Missouri town are hard to shake. Today, the most influential government leaders from our region insisted that things needed to change.
I think that last night the militarization of the response became more of the problem than any solution. I think it escalated the situation. It didn't de-escalate the situation.
But just because the cops as soldiers approach is being played down, it doesn't mean the deeper problems will go away.
They've acted like an occupying force for years.
St. Louis University professor Norm White says the militarization of police and their role in Ferguson is a dramatic ramping up of the bully-like policing that poor, crime-plagued communities have complained about for many years.
People are angry when they see that the police have come in there as an occupying force and calling it a war zone. So they're reacting. It's kind of a one-upsmanship, and I don't know where we go from there. I don't know that you're going to stop that.
Well, we all hope and pray it stops tonight. According to the Ferguson police chief, the decisions of what to do and when to do it were made by tactical supervisors from St. Louis County who were in charge. Who made the decision to send in the heavily armed tactical units and use them this way? So, is that County Police Chief John Belmar? Is he the one who is ultimately responsible? A county police spokesman did not respond to our emailed questions, my page, or my request to interview Chief Belmar. Craig Cheatham, News 4.
We have a farmer's market and there's new construction, new restaurants and just different things like that. We have bike races for the community. We have runs and the food trucks come out on Monday, and that's been the reality that I've lived in for the last 6 years, which is much different than the things that are happening now. The conclusion that I think we can all kind of come to is maybe there are two different Ferguson that are existing at the same time.
This is News 4 at 6.
Scenes like this echoing through Ferguson last night. But today, police say their tactics will change. Governor Jay Nixon has asked the Highway Patrol to step in and lead the police forces on the ground. And he reiterated calls for a fair investigation into the death of Michael Brown. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us for News 4 at 6. I'm Sharon Reed.
And I'm Steve Savard. We also welcome viewers from our sister station in Kansas City, KCTV 5. Happening right now in Ferguson, the Missouri Highway Patrol just finished marching with peaceful demonstrators in Ferguson. This is a live look from Sky Zoom 4 over the scene.
Our Corey Stark was marching along with them. He joins us live with reaction from the crowd.
Yeah, Sharon, that was a very peaceful march down West Florissant toward the Canfield Green Apartments where Michael Brown was shot and killed on Saturday. And you can still see a lot of those protesters. They've come back to this area where the Quick Trip, where it's been, lack of a better word, kind of ground zero. But you mentioned this march. It was a very peaceful march. And the biggest difference is that Missouri State Highway Patrol and the St. Louis County Police were leading this march as they were mingling with the protesters and asking for peace. The person with the Missouri State Highway Patrol that is in charge now is Captain Ron Johnson. He's from the Ferguson area, and it was a very chilling moment about 30 minutes ago when he first met with this large crowd. He said, "I'm from this area and I love you." The crowd cheered and said, "We love you too." And I asked Captain Johnson about that, what his reaction was when he heard that. He said, "That just means that we have a lot of good people out here," and that is what he is hoping for tonight as a very peaceful march happens, or protest happens here in the Ferguson area tonight. So of course we'll stay out here. We'll have that sound with Captain Ron Johnson, as again we were there when he was talking to this crowd for the very first time. We'll have that tonight at 10 o'clock. We're live in Ferguson. Corey Stark, News 4.
New at 6, the change in police tactics announced by Governor Nixon was met with a change in atmosphere in Ferguson last night. The governor's decisions are being met by opposition from the St. Louis County prosecutor Bob McCullough. I went to McCullough's office this afternoon to ask why he's upset with Nixon's decision to put the Missouri State Highway Patrol in charge of policing efforts.
At first, there's no legal authority for the governor to step in and do that. Second, there was no practical reason for the governor to step in and do that. It was already implemented.
St. Louis County Prosecutor Bob McCullough says County Police Chief John Belmar and Missouri Highway Patrol Captain Ron Johnson had been working together and contacting him on a daily basis. He says a plan was already in place for a shift in police tactics before Governor Nixon came to town.
So overnight, that operation started. And so the plan that went into effect yesterday, late afternoon, was developed by this command staff, which included the chief, Captain Johnson, and all the other commanders.
So you don't necessarily think the press conference was necessary and publicly saying that we're relieving county of operations here and putting the Highway Patrol in charge?
That should not have happened.
I asked McCullough what he thinks Nixon should have done.
At a bare minimum, sat down with the commander, with Chief Belmar, and said, okay, what was last night about, what went on with that, and what is the plan?
Now, St. Louis County Executive Charlie Dooley is calling for the state's Attorney General to assign a special prosecutor to the Michael Brown case.
And I think if his objectivity is in question, he's a part of the problem. We need to remove that problem so we can get to a solution.
The people of this county have, I think, placed their trust in me, and they've done that for a reason, and that's because I've been as fair and impartial and done as thorough a job as we could.
McCullough says it's not uncommon in big cases to have players request a special prosecutor, but he says his record proves he's capable.
And it will be. I mean, there's always going to be some criticism out there, but I'm a big kid. I've got broad shoulders. I can take it.
According to Missouri Attorney General Chris Koster, state law prevents him or the governor from replacing McCullough as the head of the investigation. Only a judge could appoint a special prosecutor, according to Koster.
My name is Charles Davis. I'm the owner of Ferguson Burger Bar and More. This community right now is at a outrage, which is trying to stay peaceful, but with not getting the results in which we feel that we should be getting, they're just at an outrage.
News 4 tracking the latest on the Ferguson shooting.
The officer that was involved in the shooting of Michael Brown was Darren Wilson.
The name of the officer who took the fatal shots released today.
New surveillance video of a crime police say involved Michael Brown.
Strong reaction on the street today to the latest developments.
News 4 covering all of it for you tonight.
Live from KMOV, this is News 4 at 5.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us on News 4 at 5. I'm Sharon Reed.
I'm Steve Savard. We also welcome viewers from our sister station, KCTV5 in Kansas City. It's been a whirlwind day with the release of new information in the deadly police shooting of Michael Brown in Ferguson.
First, the name of the officer who shot and killed Brown was released.
The officer that was involved in the shooting of Michael Brown was Darren Wilson. He's been a police officer for 6 years, has had no disciplinary action taken against him.
Second, Ferguson police released this surveillance video. It shows Michael Brown robbing cigars from the Ferguson market and pushing the clerk. This was shortly before the shooting.
And third, we learned Officer Wilson stopped Michael Brown because Brown and his friend were in the middle of the street, not because of the reported robbery. These announcements producing a flood of emotions in and around Ferguson today.
Let's go to Sky Zoom 4 above the area right now. News 4's Ray Preston has been near the QT that has been at the center of much of the action for the past week. Ray.
This is the way it's been for the past several hours. You can see that there's a line of cars, people honking, a lot of folks out here with signs as well. It has been an incredible scene here today. It's been a mixture really of anger, love, debate, and emotions certainly that are still running high. You know, tonight will be a pivotal night when it comes to the community's reaction to the Michael Brown shooting. The officer's name, the new information released today has also renewed the passions that people feel about what has happened.
Can't take it no more. Can't take it no more. Can't take it no more.
Within minutes after police released the officer's name, the QT erupted into debates, dialogue, and dissension. Gerald McNary doesn't believe the security camera video from the convenience store is really Michael Brown.
That's been 4 days, but this is him. But this is him. I want you to get a good look. This is him. It's been 4 days. Come on, bro. Get out of here. You waited until today to say something.
Kenneth Fisher stood silently with his hands above his head in what has become the symbol of the movement.
Every night I came out here, every day since it happened, I've been out in these streets. I've been tear gas, dogs sicked on me, and everything else for wanting to be on my street that I've been on for 20 years.
Color don't have nothing to do with it. We need them to come out, and we need them to support issues that's going to involve everybody.
You got Crips, you got Bloods, you got Whites, you got Black, you got everybody out here together as a team.
Some pointed to a lack of black political power as part of the problem.
Charlie Dooley, since he's been in office, look at Glasgow. Look at Glasgow Village since Charlie Dooley been in office. Look at Belfast since Charlie Dooley been in office.
Now the attention turns to tonight. After a night of relative calm, many are hoping things stay peaceful. Fisher believes they will.
The first night I was screaming Black Power. After yesterday I was screaming power to the people. Because we all together. We all together, every last one of us. This St. Louis, this our town, this our city.
One observer says one thing, though, that is a little bit disturbing is that right now emotions rather than logic and common sense seem to be the dominant force in some of the debates on the street, and they're hoping that folks keep that passion under control tonight and those emotions in check. Reporting live from Ferguson, Missouri, Ray Preston, News 4.
Just before Mike Brown was shot and killed, he was a suspect in a strong-arm robbery. Originally, we had just had these still pictures from the store camera. Then this video was released. Police said the robbery took place Saturday just before noon at a convenience store along West Florissant Road. Brittany Noble spoke with police who say the officer involved in the shooting didn't know about Brown's involvement in the robbery at that time.
Well, today, Ferguson police say Officer Darren Wilson was aware of a nearby robbery when he ran into Brown that fateful afternoon. But police also say the officer did not know Brown was a suspect when he saw him walking in the street. The officer involved in the shooting, was he aware of the robbery call?
I don't know. I don't know what came out in his interview. I know his initial contact was not related to the robbery.
Police say 28-year-old Darren Wilson met Brown after he was walking down the street, blocking traffic. Chief Tom Jackson said he would not have released this video of Mike Brown in an alleged strong-arm robbery if the media had not pressed him for answers.
Because you asked for it. You asked for it. I held it for as long as I could.
Police say Brown took cigars from a store along West Florissant and roughed up an employee before walking out. Court documents also named Dorian Johnson, but he will not be charged.
Regardless if he robbed somebody, took something from somebody, it does not justify a police officer gunning a man down if he's giving his hands up innocently. That's why we saying hands up, don't shoot.
They're trying to discredit this man. And even if that is the case and he stole, everything out there, candy bars, not I mean kill him. That means get him some help.
Many of the people that I spoke with say they would like to see the officer accused of shooting unarmed Mike Brown held accountable. Police say they are still investigating the officer-involved shooting. They also say it could take weeks before the investigation is complete. Live in Ferguson, Brittany Noble, News 4.
Such a busy day. It seems almost every hour today we've learned new information about this case.
The news really started rolling in about 9 o'clock this morning when Ferguson police announced the name of the officer who shot Michael Brown. News 4's Mike Colombo was on hand for that announcement.
The name is Darren, D-A-R-R-E-N, Wilson, W-I-L-S-O-N. And thank you, and I'll see you again this afternoon.
With those words, Ferguson Police Chief Tom Jackson was whisked away, having just shared possibly the most speculated about name in recent St. Louis history. We now know Darren Wilson was the Ferguson police officer who shot Michael Brown last Saturday. Wilson, a 6-year police veteran, worked for 2 years in Jennings before spending the last 4 years in Ferguson. We found Wilson was given an award in February of this year by the department for extraordinary effort in the line of duty.
He was a gentleman, he's a quiet officer, and he has been an excellent officer for the police department.
Chief Jackson's comments don't sit well with the demonstrators I talked to.
What he said is something that was trying to create something, okay?
You believe what the chief said out here releasing that officer's name is trying to create something?
No, what he said before he released the name.
He's referring to the comments and information released by Chief Jackson regarding the strong-arm robbery Michael Brown is accused of committing prior to his shooting death. The feeling among many in this crowd is that Ferguson police are using that alleged robbery to paint a different picture of who Brown was.
You know, even if hypothetically he did rob the place, that's still no reason to be gunned down like that.
Friday afternoon, Chief Jackson said Officer Wilson did not approach Brown because he was a suspect in that robbery. A statement causing even more tension among demonstrators.
Man, I just think it's all crazy, you know what I mean? It took them 6 days to find something out and finally tell the public. I just don't believe it. I just don't believe it. I don't.
Reporting in Ferguson, I'm Mike Colombo, News 4.
This was the scene in Ferguson last night. Peaceful demonstrators marching side by side with police.
After announcing the name of the officer involved in the shooting today, we wanted to know what's the plan moving forward to try to make certain violence doesn't break out again tonight. Alyssa Reitmeyer talked one-on-one with the Missouri State Highway Patrol.
Missouri State Highway Patrol tells me they expect security detail tonight to be much like it was last night, with minimal troopers out on the roads, only stepping up their patrol if necessary.
We're going to give people their space. We're going to let them protest.
Sergeant Al Notham with the Missouri State Highway Patrol says no additional troopers will be on site in Ferguson tonight. The majority of officers will remain at command post along with armored vehicles and riot equipment.
Given the release of the name today, is there more concern tonight for violence than there was last night?
I think at this point we're anticipating everyone to be on their best behavior.
In our anger, we have to make sure that we don't burn down our own house.
Around 36 Ferguson residents came to the press conference with Captain Ron Johnson, answering questions on security and relations with the community going forward. Since his appointment as commander on scene, the interactions have been peaceful.
If there's no accountability held upon the part of those folk who released the information, then I think things will change.
Threats of violence tonight have already been floating on social media.
Of course, we're going to have a lot of our troopers on standby, but we're not going to be out there in force like we were in the previous evening. So we just want everybody to have a good time and get it out of their system. We'll be there if they need us.
I don't know that it will or won't be enough. What it really comes down to how the community responds to this.
Captain Johnson said going forward, the media will be briefed every day on any reports of violence throughout the night. Reporting in Ferguson, Alyssa Reitmeyer, News 4.
Off once again in Ferguson. The breaking news within the past hour, indeed within the past 20 minutes, we've seen full-on rioting again, looting as well. We are working to establish with our crews in the field who are monitoring various scenes, trying to bring you the pictures, but things have really, as we said, jumped off in Ferguson, and we're going to have to see and say together at this point. Already reports of looting, a beauty supply store, a liquor store, an electronics store, all of that going down. There's reports of tear gas and indeed a shooting victim we can confirm has been taken to Christian Northeast Hospital. That shooting occurred at Canfield and West Florissant, and we've learned West Florissant is shut down and police are once again back in full riot gear. Again, we are working to establish with our crews in the field to get you some live pictures, but within just the last 20 minutes, a whole lot has gone down in Ferguson. Again, police firing tear gas, a shooting victim, looting of at least 3 stores. There are reports that some residents have attempted to stop those looters, but for the most part, the situation anything but in control. Our crews are in the field. We have at least 3 crews. And let's go to some video earlier. There you see police back in full riot gear. And as one of our crews told us earlier tonight, 20 minutes or so ago, this is Tuesday night all over again. Police may have been shot at tonight. Members of the media being cautioned tonight. And there you can see those demonstrators, tear gas canisters fired in the streets, not really dispersing, and police at one point were in a standoff with them, and we were told that they linked arms, these demonstrators, turned their backs to police, almost daring them to act. I want to go to Alonzo Medcalf in the field for us. Alonzo, I know you had some tense moments, even may have been hit with tear gas. Tell us what you see right now.
Well, Sharon Reed is a very intense scene out here right now. Earlier, the police were standing down the crowd. As you can see from the video, it was intense on both sides. The police had to use tear gas again on the crowd. The crowd dispersed. I was hit with the tear gas myself. The police retreated, Sharon, back to the staging area, and then they came back with more personnel. I don't know if you can see from the video or not. I can't see the video. But as of right now, they tried to calm the crowd down. It did not work. They're actually, as of right now, they're looting right now. I don't know if you can take my camera or not, but they are actually trying to get into the Ferguson market. I have no idea why. I don't know what they're doing, but they're trying to get into the Ferguson market. They've broken down the fence that separates the Ferguson market from the McDonald's. I don't know if there are any McDonald's employees in there, but I fear for their safety as of right now. They may want to seek help or seek shelter somewhere else in the McDonald's. It's a lot of chaos, just mass chaos going on. There's nothing out here makes sense as of right now. We don't know what they're doing. The police have not taken charge or have not crossed West Florissant at all. So they've decided to hang back, I guess. I don't know why they've chosen not to cross Ferguson Road to calm the crowd down, essentially. We got police helicopters on the scene. Police are, again, talking to the crowd to get them to calm down, to disperse, and go back to their vehicles and their home. The crowd is not compliant. The crowd is not listening. As of right now, it's still a very intense scene on Ferguson and West Florissant. Some people still have their hands up in protest to show support for Mike Brown, but other people are here just to loot and cause chaos. If you can see what I'm showing you here, I'm trying to keep my eye both open and also shoot, which is difficult. So, but Sharon, back to you.
We also want to get folks to Russell Kinsall, News 4's Russell Kinsall. He has some new developments there. I know you've been outside the Ferguson market there, Russell. Russell, what do you know now?
The owner of the market is here. He's inside, and he's told us that we could come and take a look very briefly. So follow me, and we'll take a look at what was done by the looters who came into his store. Not only did they take things out, but they also ransacked the place and left a mess behind. There are chips, cans of soda, display racks on the floor, food that came out of those racks on the floor. They obviously got behind the counter and were taking more expensive bottles of liquor out of there. Who knows what kind of damage they did while they were behind the counter. They broke into the office. So I'm being told that they broke into the office. What kinds of things did they steal from the office? Still assessing the damage now, they tell me.
Russell, anything in particular that you could see was targeted, or is it just pretty much everything?
They were grabbing some food, they were grabbing alcohol. As we watched the people walking out, they were getting large bottles of alcohol, so no doubt they were getting either their favorite types of alcohol or the stuff that was more expensive. But there are a lot of bottles of the alcohol that are kept behind the counter. Yeah, you can see there that the counters have been cleared off. Several of the counters have been cleared off, so they were getting the more expensive stuff and taking it out. Let me see if the owner would be willing to talk to us. No, he said he'd rather not talk. He gave us the permission to come in, and we appreciate that. But he's pretty upset, and his attorney also was pretty upset that the fact that the police stood by for much of the evening and watched the looting go on. There were citizens who protested, who came up here and tried to protect the place, but they weren't here the entire evening. And when they weren't here to protect the door, the looters came in and grabbed whatever they could and ran out. A lot of bottles of alcohol, but other things as well. And they left a real mess behind in the store. No telling how many thousands of dollars in damage they did to this store, which was just a store here servicing the community.
You know, and that's something to bear in mind. We're looking at this mess here live for the first time, and you just have to think that's someone's livelihood there. This is how people put food on the tables for their families, and the entire place is just ransacked.
Yeah, this is his livelihood. This is how he pays his bills. This is how he feeds his family. And now he's going to have a big bill to repair. He's got to replace the food and the items that were stolen, and that's going to take away from the money for paying his own bills and for taking care of his own family. So yeah, it is a sad scene here, and it's one of the things that when it comes to the looting, there were folks that we talked to here this evening who said the looters were not people that live in this community. They really wanted to make that point very clear. The looters are not the people that care about this community. They're people from outside this community that don't care what happens and the people that are hurt in the wake of their violence and their theft. And one person was making the point that Quick Trip that was burned, they were asking now, where are we going to get gas? It does nothing to further the point that people want to make or to express the legitimate anger over the death of Mike Brown. What it does is it harms the community, and it takes away businesses that serve the community. And so not only our business owners, but also the people who frequent those businesses and appreciate them being here are very angered and disappointed by what they've seen tonight.
Russell, you know, when I came in this morning, in the overnight hours, we could still see from your live picture that looting was continuing. Has it stopped now? I mean, you're in the store. It's not happening at the moment in that store. I understand that. But for the most part, you know, looking up and down the street, has it calmed down?
Oh, yes. Up until a couple of minutes ago, shortly before 5, the owner was not here yet. And so the looting had continued for a couple of hours, off and on, as people would come and try to protect the business. But off and on for a couple of hours, the looting happened. And it wasn't a big rush of people, but it was a few people at a time. But up until the owner came here with others and his attorney, the looting had happened. It has stopped now, and I believe the looting has stopped at other places as well. But the police were not very far away. They were watching it happen, and they just stood there for crowd control, but they did not stop the crime from happening here, looting the business and damaging it and breaking into the office and stealing things.
All right, Russell Kinsall live for us there at the Ferguson Market there in Ferguson. It was not the only business that was looted.
So to protect the people and property of Ferguson today, I signed an order declaring a state of emergency and ordering the implementation of a curfew in the impacted area of Ferguson.
It is 10 p.m., 2 hours before Governor Nixon's newly announced curfew goes into effect. Live pictures here. We've seen growing numbers of demonstrators peaceful. But what happens when the clock strikes midnight? Captain Ron Johnson of the Missouri Highway Patrol promising there will be no tear gas tonight, no police force to remove the protesters. Instead, he says authorities will simply talk to the crowds and talk them into leaving. So what happens if demonstrators just stay? News 4 crews strategically positioned throughout the Ferguson area and beyond tonight. Captain Johnson promising we will have access to document activity throughout the night. But again, that curfew, midnight till 5 a.m. Our Chris Negus embedded with police and protesters tonight. And Chris, is there a plan in place if some refuse to obey the governor's order?
Well, Sharon, that's a good question. We're here at Northwind Estates Drive in West Florissant. The road is actually closed, and you can see that's not stopping people from getting into this area. There are people standing in the middle of the streets. There are people chanting the same thing they've been chanting all week: no justice, no peace. And you see all of these cars and all of these people that are still making their way through here, honking their horns. Now, they've been very clear about tonight's curfew, saying that goes into effect at midnight. They do not want people on the streets in this area after midnight, between midnight and 5 a.m. The rain is now falling, but people are not leaving. It's only 10 o'clock. I've talked to a lot of people out here. Some of them say they plan to respect that curfew. Others say they're not going anywhere, and it really just depends on the person that you talk to. Let's listen in to some of the people that I spoke to about an hour and a half ago about what their plans are at midnight. This curfew goes into effect tonight at midnight. Do you plan to respect that curfew?
I mean, I have no choice because I ain't trying to be locked up, you know, but yeah, I'm gonna respect it, but I don't condone it.
I mean, of course, you know what I mean, I'm gonna go home because I don't want nothing to escalate further situations, you know what I mean, stuff get real bad.
Antonio French here with me. I mean, this curfew tonight at midnight, what are your thoughts on that?
I support it. I think we are in an emergency, in a crisis situation. Having been here last night, I think that you know, there are some guys who are opportunists, and they see this as an opportunity to just cause some trouble. The guys who were causing that trouble last night were not protesters. They were not here all day with us. Some of them just came to start a mess. And I think our community needs a little bit of a rest right now. And I think it's not too much to tell us to go home and come back at 6 a.m. the next day and start over.
And just a few minutes ago, I saw Antonio French out here along with Lewis Reed from the city of St. Louis. Both of them say they're going to be out here with other community organizers telling people to go home at midnight. Now, there's people out here. Are you guys going home at midnight?
Nah.
Why not?
Because we out here, man. We just need justice. That's all we looking for.
So you know there's a curfew in effect at midnight tonight. Do you know about that?
I'll go to jail.
You're willing to go to jail and stay out here?
I'm willing to go to jail.
And what are other people in this crowd telling you?
They gonna go to jail too.
All right, thanks for talking to us tonight.
Going to jail.
All right, so we're hearing that from this gentleman here. Thank you for talking to us.
We all going to jail.
Telling us that they're willing to go to jail, that they do not plan to honor this curfew. And as you heard earlier, Captain Ron Johnson saying they're not going to deploy tear gas in this area. So a big question, what's going to happen when the clock strikes midnight? We'll be out here to let you know. Live in Ferguson, Chris Negus, News 4.
This is News 4 Live coverage in Ferguson once again, where we have seen more unrest and violence already tonight.
We have crews in Fort Ferguson, and as you can see, police are advancing down. We believe this is West Florissant. We have reports tonight that Molotov cocktails have been fired at police. We do see smoke. We're not sure. We haven't confirmed whether these are smoke bombs or actual tear gas canisters being launched by police in response to protesters. But again, right now, it looks like it's going to be a night of confrontation again in Ferguson.
A reminder, the governor's order extended, the state of emergency extended for tonight. There is a curfew in effect from midnight until 5 a.m. So as we approach the midnight hour, we've had our crews in place, ready and watching to see how demonstrators would perform tonight. Those crews in the field already indicating to us, much as they did last night, that for the most part, demonstrators on the scene told them that they would leave, remain peaceful, while others said they were not certain and perhaps would be staying on again.
Sharon, of interest, I think moments ago on the right side of our screen, we could see a couple of people walking, pedestrians that looked like they had gas masks on in anticipation in case, well, there's another individual with one on there. There's another. I don't know if those are journalists or not, but it looks like clearly there were some people tonight prepared in case tear gas was launched. We have seen that in past nights. There were reports last night that tear gas was launched. There were smoke bombs, we know, launched. Right now we can't tell the difference what is producing that smoke, but we were told that Molotov cocktails were fired at police tonight in Ferguson.
Sharon Reed alongside Steve Savard here in the News 4 studios. Our crews, multiple crews strategically placed in and around Ferguson. Indeed, some on our staff telling us that as they were on the roadways this evening, they saw massive amounts of activity, police activity, seemingly headed towards the Ferguson area.
Now again, the second night of curfew does not begin for about 2.5 hours. Now you were working last night, Sharon. I don't remember seeing this kind of heavy police presence in Ferguson, not at least at 9:30, 2.5 hours before curfew set in, right?
Well, I will say this, as we watched it play out live right here on News 4, hour after hour, we didn't see police activity as far as movement goes until well past the curfew. Remember, Steve, there was that group of demonstrators, the holdout demonstrators, we'll call them, that at about 12:45, 12:48, well past the curfew, they were not budging, even moved their cars into the street. And only then, when police later told us they had to get to a shooting victim urgently, did they launch the smoke bombs first and then the tear gas.
We've had reports earlier today, of course, there was a rally at Grace Church with the Reverend Al Sharpton, other leaders, and the Michael Brown family. Also today, another development today, Attorney General Eric Holder is calling for an independent federal autopsy on Michael Brown, an additional autopsy. And we're told that President Obama, who has been briefed in Martha's Vineyard while on vacation about the situation in Ferguson, will be heading back to Washington, D.C., and will have further meetings with Attorney General Eric Holder tomorrow.
Yeah, that federal autopsy, a very rare move. Chris Stanford, we saw you step in front of the camera moments ago. Bring us up to date.
Sharon and Steve, first let me apologize if my eyes are watering and I might have trouble talking because we experienced a pretty strong dose of tear gas here just a few moments ago. We're at the intersection of Ferguson and West Florissant, right by the McDonald's and the media staging area. We were putting together our report for 10 o'clock and stepped out of the vehicle when we saw the armored vehicles move forward. We were wondering what was going on, stepped out and immediately got hit with that gas. Let me bring you up to date. Let's show you what's going on right here live on West Florissant. You see the police presence. You see them continuing to pursue north on West Florissant. We're not sure why. We're out of the loop. We don't know why they were marching towards us and why they were coming towards us. Like I said,
All right, Chris Stanford, as the picture is frozen right now, again, a very fluid situation in Ferguson right now. Our Chris Stanford says they got no advance warning, the press did, in that staging area, and police, for some reason, working to confirm it right now, did launch gas. He believes perhaps tear gas. He's tearing up. You could see it.
Yeah, I think his eyes are the confirmation here. We weren't sure whether or not smoke bombs or tear gas, but Chris is saying tear gas. Chris has been out in Ferguson for a few nights now covering the story, so we have to assume that it is tear gas at this point. And we don't know really what has led to the latest round of confrontation. Have we reestablished contact with Chris Stanford?
Well, we see the picture getting established right there.
Yeah, I'm here. Can you guys hear me?
Seen reports, St. Louis County saying they have reports of a shooting, perhaps a shooting victim, minor injuries. Chris, you're back now. Continue.
Yeah, we weren't hearing anything about a shooting. We're a few blocks away from the QT down near Canfield. Up here again, like.
All right, still having trouble with a live picture from Ferguson. As I understand it, these are pictures from last night. Is that right, producer John O'Sullivan? Yeah, this is last night. Sharon, you were working. You saw this picture last night. At what point did you sense last night that there would be confrontations? Was it not until after midnight and the curfew had already kicked in?
Well after midnight, yeah. Steve. Police showed what is described by most as enormous restraint. Even those demonstrators who were in the middle of the road, some had moved their cars there, refusing to leave. They did not move in until they acknowledged to us that they had a shooting suspect, a perp, near Red's Barbecue. It's all in the area of the QT there. And that's when they launched the smoke bombs. And then finally, to get to the shooting victim, they launched the tear gas. Back live here. These are live pictures. Ferguson tonight. Sharon Reed alongside Steve Savard. And we have crews throughout the area, crews embedded with police.
Matt Cesny is also covering the story in Ferguson tonight. We're going to go to him for the very latest. Matt, where are you and what are you seeing at this point?
Steve, we are at the Police Command Center, which is at the shopping center just up from West Florissant, from where that Quick Trip is. And I have to tell you, this is the first really tense night we've had here at the Police Command Center, and I'll show you why. I'm stepping aside. We now have a line of police officers in helmets, shields, and gas masks, and they are all facing Lucas and Hunt Road. They're facing the 180-degree opposite from where all the action has been this week. We don't know if any protesters are actually marching up Lucas and Hunt and coming this way, but clearly the police have some intelligence that something may be headed this way, and they are prepared with nightsticks, helmets, and shields. So far, we're not getting any indication as to what is going on, but I can tell you it is very tense up here right now because for the entire week, this has been an area that has been considered a safe zone for police and also for media covering this. And now for the first time, it seems as if the front lines of this are coming directly right here to our doorstep. We're going to remain here as long as it's safe and bring you live pictures for as long as we can to see what does transpire here. But for now, we have these riot police forming a line in the shopping center on the back end of the Police Command Center in Ferguson. Right now, we're live in Ferguson. Matt Cesny, News 4.
Well, Matt, the key is safe. You have to remain safe. Don't do anything to put yourself or our crews in danger. I know you won't. You're a veteran reporter. You've seen and done it all on the streets. But give us a sense of how many law enforcement officers there are lined up behind you, anticipating any trouble that may be coming toward them. How many are there at this point?
Well, you know, I mean, it could be 100. It's hard to tell once it gets past about 30 feet or so how close shoulder to shoulder they are, but there may be close to 100. And I have to tell you, Steve, they're all different police agencies. We're seeing blue shirts from the Highway Patrol. We're seeing blue shirts from local police. We're also seeing the brown shirts from the county police. I've seen cars pull up from Olivet and St. Charles County. There are officers from all over the St. Louis metropolitan area here forming this line right now, but they stretch clear across this parking lot from where we are on the sidewalk all the way to the wall of that Target department store. As I mentioned, they are not flinching. They are facing forward, holding their batons with their helmets and their shields, and they're also wearing gas masks. So my impression is they are ready to shoot tear gas or release smoke bombs to anybody who tries to infiltrate this police command area, which I mentioned has been considered a safe zone for the entire week.
Some North St. Louis County businesses are taking no chances tonight as they prepare again for possible looting.
Yeah, understandable. This was the scene last week when a Ferguson Quick Trip was looted. Hours later, rioters burned the store down. Chris Nagus is live in Delwood, where a second Quick Trip location is shut down and preparations have been made to protect the property.
Steve, I want to give you some perspective on this. We're near 270 in West Florissant. We are 2 miles away from that gas station that was burned down by looters. And today you see this. Quick Trip crews out here putting up this fence. This fence goes all the way around the property to protect it. They were also out here today boarding up the windows. Now, when I started this story, I thought this was the story, this imagery. Then I ran into a mother and her 2 children. That's the real story out here, how scenes like this impact the people that live in this neighborhood. Did you want to go to this Quick Trip today?
I would have loved to go on to this Quick Trip today. I have to go all the way on Chambers to get gas.
Sherika Curry is like so many others who are living among scenes that resemble a movie, not the Ferguson they knew. In the backseat, her 9-year-old son Ryan and his little sister Jayla are missing school because it's closed. All thanks to the chaos.
I'm trying to get back to doing math and getting all my A's.
Mom says Ryan is a straight A student. He has perfect attendance. Ryan couldn't wait to get out of the car to show me this, a laptop he won for all of his hard work in school. Are you proud of that laptop?
Yes.
And I'm proud of him.
Tell me, why did you get that laptop?
Because I got all straight A's and I was the only one on perfect attendance.
But now he and his sister can't go to school. Their mom can't fill up her car. Even after all the violence and all the terrible things that have happened over the past week, Ryan is sticking to his dream. This kid knows what he wants to do when he grows up.
To protect and serve.
He wants to be a cop. he does.
Sherika wants to raise her children here, and she wants the scenes from the past week to fade from memory. She believes everyone has a right to make their voices heard, but nobody has a right to tear up her neighborhood.
I really think that these people should be arrested. I mean, basically, I'm tired of it.
So take away all the politicians, all the looters, all the people that have been out here making trouble, and you're left with people, mothers like Sherika and her 2 children, that just want to resume their normal lives. I'm going to share their story on my Twitter page at Chris Negus KMOV, along with my KMOV Facebook account if you want to share it with others. Meanwhile, I talked with Quick Trip officials. They say this is only a precautionary measure after what happened 2 miles from here last Sunday. No word on when this gas station will reopen. Reporting live in North County, Chris Negus, News 4.
Another vehicle is coming out onto the middle of the street. More people are now walking out. There's a man with a bullhorn approaching the police line. I can tell you Captain Ron Johnson is right at the front of that police line. He is not wearing a helmet or any kind of body armor whatsoever. He is standing there looking at the crowd, standing in front of the officers. He is now speaking with another gentleman who has come up. They are talking. It seems as if this entire thing is at a critical point right now where it could tip in either direction, and Johnson and this gentleman seem to be doing their best to try to keep this crowd under control. More people trying to approach the emergency vehicle. And again, the gentleman with the bullhorn urging everyone to get out of the way. I can tell you there's probably a lot of media crowding on the side here as well, with cameras as well. Now here come more officers. They're coming out. They have weapons. They are going to make arrests. They're making arrests. Right now they're grabbing people and making arrests, and they are handcuffing them and taking them back. I don't know what this will do to the crowd, but tensions are really high right now, and there's a lot of anger all of a sudden that spilled out into the street. More police are working their way out into the crowd, and they are pushing everyone back. They're pushing everyone back. It is an incredibly chaotic scene right now. Everybody's moving back real quick again. The police are going back in their lines. We're still hearing that piercing siren sound. There's a lot more police officers here that have come streaming down West Florissant to support that line of officers that were here at Ferguson Avenue. The protesters are not going away. They seem to be moving forward. Now an armored vehicle is coming down this way. I got to move out of the street. It's coming this way. I'm going to retreat back over here. And I have a better view now of what I can see. They're still making efforts to try and move that crowd back away from that line of armored officers. Right now, it seems as if I'm not seeing any more bottles or things being thrown at the police. A lot of people here are making a tremendous effort to try and calm everybody down. That piercing noise just got a little louder. And now that line seems to be retreating back to a distance here that police maybe feel comfortable with at this point. I hope you guys can still hear us and still get this, because it really is quite interesting. It's quite interesting what's going on. We really hit a point here where it seemed as if things were going to tip into another night of violence, but it may be at this point it's been avoided right now. Now, I can tell you there seems to be a great deal of anger in the crowd as it continues to retreat back up West Florissant. The police are not moving. They are still holding their police line. We are at the corner of Ferguson Avenue in West Florissant. We are right in front of a Family Dollar store that was actually open for business today and so far has not been damaged. Okay, that piercing noise is getting louder again. It seems to be coming from that large armored vehicle right in the center of the street. The crowd, some in the crowd holding their hands up, milling around. This was not the way things had been going for most of the day and into the early evening hours here. It wants to move everybody out of the street, and they are making an attempt to move everyone out of the street.
And we just heard
right
some
now.
shots.
And that's making a lot of people angry right now, I can tell you. That is making a lot of people angry.
Armet Tesny
It just
live.
now that armored vehicle went straight down West Florissant, and I don't know if it's answering an emergency call or what it's doing. It's now taking a position up in a parking lot near the McDonald's. It looks like a side position from these protesters. The other officers remain, and the other armored vehicles remain right now. I'm just getting reunited with my photographer, Scott Thomas. We had gotten separated, but he kept coming. He kept bringing the pictures to you. Scott, we're on live, so now we got another event going on out in the street. It looks like we've got protesters holding hands, and I don't know if they're getting ready to pray or if they're doing a form of peaceful protest. But as I look to my right, I can see these officers. They certainly seem ready to go. And there's the siren again. And they're not moving. They are, go ahead. Yeah, Steve, it looks as if these are a group of the peaceful protesters who are now making a human chain and actually making an effort to police themselves, and they are pushing the crowd north on West Florissant. They're pushing them away.
We got a whole.
Now I can see lights on the other end, police lights on the other end, but they are pushing this crowd away from these police officers.
Matt, we want to
continue to move and not break their line. Yeah.
Matt, we'll step away from you for just a moment. Julian Johnson is about 3 to 4 blocks away in West Florissant. You see a line of police cars heading, we believe, toward Julian's position. And Julian, do we understand that you heard gunshots within the last few minutes?
Steve, that's right. We're at the corner of West Florissant and Canfield, and just a few moments ago, we heard several flurries of gunshots. We're not sure if that's what this group of about 9 or 10 officers, possibly 12, have just rushed down West Florissant to get to. But again, there were about, I'd say, 9 gunshots that we heard on this end. That's further down about a quarter mile from where Matt Tesny is up the street. Right now, you're seeing them gather at the burned QT at North Winds Estates Drive right there at the corner of West Florissant and North Winds Estates Drive. It looks like they're setting up, possibly positioning in some way to possibly deal with these protesters right now. As I was coming down to this location, we saw hundreds of protesters walking away from us toward Matt's location. So that was that skirmish up there that they had with police. But all of a sudden, when we heard those gunshots, the officers took off in this direction. So we have officers here also in the parking lot that we're set up in here at the corner of Canfield and West Florissant. And you can see there's just people that are out here, not even protesting, but just trying to see exactly what's going on. We're not sure if they're a part of the peaceful protesters or a part of the people who are causing trouble. You can see 2 more. That's a county police and a state trooper rolling out of here. There's going to be 2 more state trooper vans that come out here. And again, they're also going further up West Florissant toward West Florissant and Chambers. We're not sure if they might be trying to protect that Delwood border because they don't want these protesters, like they did last night, to leave Ferguson and go into Delwood to possibly cause more trouble. We saw looting at the Delwood market last night, and police are trying to put a stop to that, Sharon and Steve.
All right, Julian Johnson there. You heard him say he heard as many as 9 shots fired. Police at that burned out QT trying to get their tactical response together. Julian Johnson, a quarter of a mile away from our Matt Cesney, where there was a flurry of activity. About 9:40, you said, Matt. The crowd began to grow and bottles were thrown.
Yes, Sharon, we're hearing another loudspeaker announcement from the police asking people to disperse. It looks as if it's slowly happening. There are some people who are still trying to defy it by walking in the middle of the street, but for the most part, this crowd has cleared out and is making West Florissant clear again. But the police once again have not moved. They're at the ready. They have a straight line all the way across. And now the announcement is for us, for the reporters, to return to the side of the road and to clear the street as well. And we're complying. We're on the corner. There are a lot of people now walking around with handkerchiefs over their faces. This is obviously something that they've experienced over the last couple of days, the smell and the sting of tear gas, and many people seem to be prepared for it at this point. But right now we continue to wait. I look over at this line of police officers, and they are no more than 100 feet away from where I stand, and 100 feet in that direction are the protesters who are now still clearing out the street and moving off onto the side. But the thing to note at this point is that the police have not done anything yet. All they have done is assemble across the street, stare down the protesters, ask them to disperse, but there's been no tear gas, no flash bombs, no smoke bombs, nothing like that at this point. They continue to remain there. Here comes another armored vehicle coming out into the street. There's a bullhorn announcement for people to go home. And it is now beginning to leave. Maybe there's a sense of a little de-escalation from this right now. A few more people are still trying to come out into the middle of the street. Others are putting their arms around them, trying to compel them to go back onto the sidewalk and not escalate the situation. But there are an awful lot of police officers. Now, they do seem to be a little more relaxed than they were about 5 minutes ago, and you can probably see that from the pictures that you were seeing live. I'm going to take you over here a little bit, and you can begin to see what's going on in the street at this point. There are still a few people in the street, but for the most part, that street is clear, and the large group of protesters that were here have now dispersed under the orders of the police department and are now off all on the side of the street, on the sidewalks.
Matt, thank you very much.
Another armored vehicle, Scott, to your right, another armored vehicle is making its way through.
Matt, thank you very much. We're going to get back to you in a second. We want to head down to Julian Johnson, who's just a few blocks away from Matt Cesney. Earlier, saw a line of police cars going right by you, Julian. You heard as many as 9 gunshots off in the distance. Update us now since the last time we talked to you. What are you seeing? What's the scene there?
Steve, what I'm seeing right now is a large group of protesters screaming, "United we stand, divided we fall." You can see them carrying the American flag upside down. We've seen a lot of people, as Matt said, with gas masks on, with bandanas covering their faces, with surgical masks covering their faces in anticipation of tear gas. We haven't seen any tear gas yet, but everyone is prepared. And we don't know where this group is now heading, but it's heading toward at least the direction of that burned QT. We don't know if they're going to stop there or keep moving, but there's officers in that direction. There could be some sort of confrontation. We're not exactly sure. As I said before, we've heard several gunshots. Those officers rushing toward our direction after those gunshots went off. Now this large group of people moving away from where Matt was.
Julian, let's go back to Matt Cesney right now. We're going to cut you off because we're learning of more arrests. Matt?
Out of the street because now there's more media in the street than protesters. Captain Johnson is out in the middle now once again, as I mentioned. No body armor, no helmet whatsoever. He is out directing his men and women, telling them where to go, directing the media off to the side, but certainly some arrests were made. I couldn't see how many arrests were made, but there were some arrests. Another person with a bullhorn urging people to go back. So once again, the scene has escalated again, and it is tense. And we don't know what the next move is going to be by the protesters or by the police at this point. But as that armored vehicle moved on, now we're getting the call to move back. Looks like a gentleman with a state police logo on his shirt asking people to move back. The people who are arrested have already been taken away and put in police vehicles. All right. Yeah, we're getting advised to move back and stay out of the street.
Matt, let me ask you a question as you're moving back here.
There's a lot of yelling going on, a lot of confusion in the street.
Just a few minutes ago, Matt.
People are attempting to take control of the situation.
Matt, just a few minutes ago, things seemed to be calm out there. The protesters had left the street, gone off to the side of the road. Was there one incident? Was there anything that you could see that brought the protesters back closer to the police and escalated tensions?
If you will, with the police continues.
All right, Matt Cesny, let's recap. If you're just joining us, you're watching News 410. Sharon Reed alongside Steve Savard. Once again, here we find ourselves again live in Ferguson, already at about 9:40 p.m. As you're looking at these live images, there was a dust-up. Police moved in, made several arrests, bottles thrown, and then a quarter of a mile away where our Julian Johnson is standing, he heard his 9 gunshots. Saw a flurry of activity, police cars going up West Florissant towards Canfield, where the shots purportedly came from. And this scene that you're watching play out here, Matt Cesny says the tensions are high. There's an ebb and flow, Steve.
Yep.
He used the word anger. They seem to escalate when they see armored vehicles. Here we go again.
Yeah, about 10 minutes ago, it seemed like police had the situation under control. The protesters had receded. Some of them looked like they had left the area. Now, police aggressively walking down the street again and trying to clear, it looks like both even the media and protesters. But this scene seems to be changing every 5 minutes, and I think Matt's been on top of it, almost giving us a play-by-play, if you will, of what's going on. Just moments ago, before we went back to Matt, we saw an arrest, 2 police officers taking a man away. I don't know how many people have been arrested at this point, but clearly more than one. There have been several people already arrested here just in the 15 or 20 minutes that Matt says he's been reporting from that scene at West Florissant and Ferguson.
It does seem tonight there's a shorter window, police moving in, making arrests. That includes journalists who were warned very strongly, and you saw some of that play out moments ago here live. They want journalists in a certain area, and they definitely do not want them in the street. Let's go to our Chris Stanford standing by. Chris, tell us exactly where you are and exactly what you see.
Yeah, Sharon and Steve, I just got to the intersection of Nesbitt Drive in West Florissant, which is just a little bit north of the QT. The protesters have marched north on West Florissant from where our other crews are right now, and there's an armored vehicle in the middle of the street, and you're seeing the protesters kind of gather around that armored vehicle. Some are down on their knees, others are holding their hands up in front of the police, but at this point, all the police are doing are kind of holding their line and shining their light on some of the protesters. So a fluid situation here, to say the least.
So that's Chris Stanford's vantage point. Again, live pictures at about 9:40 p.m. A large crowd, according to our Matt Cesny, started forming here. Bottles were thrown. He said police showed restraint until he heard glass bottles break. The tension's high. Anger, police moved in quickly and seemed to make several arrests. We're working to confirm exactly how many. And then an armored vehicle came in. At the same point, a quarter of a mile away, Steve, our Julian Johnson standing by, and he heard shots fired.
Heard shots fired, and then a parade of police vehicles, 8, 9, 10 of them speeding past him down West Florissant. The scene on the right is I believe this is Nesbitt in West Florissant, where Chris Stanford is reporting from. The scene on the left you're looking at on your screen appears to be the scene where Matt Szczesny has been, where there has been some confrontation, although at this point not violent, between protesters and police officers. The police officers trying to clear the protesters out of the street. Hostility seemed to diminish a few minutes ago, but then tensions ramped up again just a few minutes ago. Let's go back to Matt Szczesny to describe what he's seeing on the scene right now. Matt?
Yeah, Steve, I am actually right behind photographer Scott Thomas. You're looking at that picture of the police officers in their helmets and shields. They're getting the call to pull back right now, so they are moving back. The police line had pushed us off the street and got us onto the sidewalk. The police are pulling back. There's more glass being broken in the street. So far, a few people are testing this, walking out into the middle of the street, but the police now continue to move back.
Let's go back to Julian Johnson, who earlier heard shots fired near Canfield in West Florissant. Julian, what's the latest there?
Steve, this time no shots fired, but glass breaking. Right across the street at Red's Barbecue. Just a few moments ago, we heard someone break glass over there, and now there's a huge crowd, a good-sized crowd gathered right outside that store. I can't see if they're actually making entry into there or if it was just some sort of broken glass. But again, in this corridor right here of Canfield and West Florissant, you just have a number of people gathered. Right now, all eyes are on Red's Barbecue to see exactly what's going on over there. Officers are still at this time making announcements for people to disperse and go home. Since the last time I've talked to you, they're saying don't throw things at us or you'll be subject to arrest. So it appears they're picking up, I also heard one of the officers say there were some rocks being thrown and some bottles being thrown at officers in this area. Again, they just want people to either keep moving or to go home, but people are doing neither at this point. They're breaking glass over at Red's Barbecue, not something that Michael Brown's family wants them to do, not something that the peaceful protesters want them to do. These are not people that are looking out for justice. They're just opportunists at this point.
And we need to make that distinction. Governor Nixon, back to him, said that as much earlier today, Steve, that there is a pocket not associated with peaceful demonstrations, not interested in justice for Mike Brown, as we've seen the hashtag and the hands up, the symbolism there. They are bent on lawlessness, and they're a rogue group, a dangerous group, and you wonder how law enforcement is going to extricate them, if you will, from the peaceful demonstrations that from the president to the governor to boots on the ground, local law enforcement and local leaders say should take place.
Well, the reality is this may end up being a marathon and not a sprint. This may be, days, weeks in the making. I don't know at this point, but I think right now, as we approach 11 o'clock here in St. Louis, and by the way, if you're looking for David Letterman, you can find him on our digital channel 4.2, as we have live continuing coverage of the crisis in Ferguson. Steve Savard and Sharon Reed with you. I think that the important thing right now is that the scene where Matt is at West Florissant and Ferguson, which looks so tense and looked like we were headed for an inevitable confrontation, has been calm for the most part for the last 45 minutes. An hour ago, I thought we were headed down a path that we weren't going to come back from.
Now there's a tear gas. There's a tear gas or smoke bombs.
Here we are.
Not sure which one, but now they have fired it off. And this is not something you want to see, but they had no choice, it appeared. They repeatedly gave orders for people to get out of the road, flashbangs. For people to get out of the road, but they're not doing it, and now you see the result. More flashbangs, more smoke bombs, and still people not getting out of the road.
On the right side of the
standing
screen.
there, some people, I just saw somebody pick up a smoke bomb or tear gas and throw it back.
And we just saw an armored vehicle headed perhaps to where you are, a quarter mile away from Matt Szczesny, Julian, working to determine if it is tear gas or a smoke bomb. Here's Chris Stanford. Let's go to him and let him describe what he feels, what he smells, what he sees.
Yeah, hi, Sharon and Steve. Yeah, they just launched a few canisters of gas over our way towards us after those shots were fired. I can't tell exactly if it was smoke or if it was tear gas. It might be a low concentration of tear gas from what we felt last night. Immediately after, same shots that Julian Johnson was describing just a short time ago. A few canisters into a neighborhood kind of towards the Quick Trip. And they still continue to fire canisters back south on West Florissant, where you see that haze of smoke off in the distance. Another flashbang there, and smoke canisters still going off. It did disperse the crowd. The crowd moved a couple of blocks north on West Florissant, and the area here emptied out pretty quickly.
Two different perspectives tonight. Chris Stanford down the road a little bit, and Julian Johnson right there, and we continue to see and hear the police trying to combat those that just refuse to get out of the road as they've been ordered to do. And wow, just a few minutes ago, everything was clear. It was quiet, relatively quiet. Julian, it is a thick cloud of smoke and haze right now, and that's much different than it was just 3 or 4 minutes ago.
There is. That smoke of that cloud of smoke is right by the burned QT. There are repeated shots that have gone off in this area. Police had no choice, it seemed, but to use either smoke bombs or tear gas to clear the crowd. We haven't gotten a whiff of that to exactly feel if it's tear gas or not. But right now, while the crowds are moving back, they're not leaving. Officers again yelling over the loudspeaker for people to go home. But people are backing up, but they're still not leaving. Now there's an officer right there in that unmarked truck. He's just pulled up. He's honking his horn at people that are in the road.
Let's go back to Matt Sesney, because there may be some activity there. And Matt, I want to know what you're able to see as that police car, a pickup truck, races perhaps towards you.
Sharon, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It was pretty loud here. There was a scene that played out while everything was going on down where Julian is. We saw an armored vehicle as you're looking down the street rolled up into a parking lot. Police swarmed around another car that was parked over there. Then in a bizarre scene, another vehicle pulled out of the middle of the street. A gentleman got out, it looked like a tourniquet around his hand or arm, said he was bleeding, and he was kind of woozy. Some people helped him up to the police line. The police took him in and obviously took him to get some kind of medical treatment, but and then that car sped out and went back up towards Canfield and towards the other end of the street. So it was another tense moment. Police weren't sure what was going on until they saw the man bleeding getting out of the car, and then they came to rush to his aid. But we're still watching that armored vehicle down there in that parking lot. It's turning around. From where we stand, I can see the smoke that is down about a quarter mile on West Florissant. But for the most part, these officers here at Ferguson Avenue are holding firm and holding their line, but not moving in on any of the crowd that's here.
All right, Matt, thank you very much. We can see from your vantage point the smoke in the distance. Let's go back to Julian Johnson, who has a bird's eye view of what's happening right there. Julian?
Steve, crowds are now starting to move into the public storage parking lot that we're in. There's a canister that was just shot very close to us. I can't tell exactly what that is, but that was really close. But now, as I said, crowds running through this parking lot at the public storage that sustained a little bit of looting damage last night. We're seeing people walk past us with gas masks, with bandanas covering their faces. Look at this guy picking it up. He's about to pick this up and toss it back. And yes, I can feel that this is tear gas. It is tear gas. My eyes starting to water and your airways are moving out. We have to back up at this point because we're too close to all this right now. Again, people with gas masks though, because yes, this is tear gas that they're firing. And again, it's just very difficult to talk in, let alone walk in, because your eyes are watering. You can feel your airways sort of close up a little bit. I'm sorry if I'm a little hard to understand right now, but we do
need to
have
apologize,
to move
Julian,
back.
as you're reporting that you've been affected by this tear gas. Police, 9:40 p.m., this started to grow here. We saw some of the unrest, bottles thrown, shots fired at some point. And now at 11:02, I believe, we saw for the first time, once again, tear gas fired by police who had tried other tactics throughout the evening.
Well, what's interesting is when we went on the air with Matt Cesny just before 10 o'clock, it looked like the hostilities and most of the people were gathered near his position at West Florissant and Ferguson. It looked like the hostilities would escalate, kind of an ebb and flow situation. That's been calm for quite a while. Look at that line of police cars headed down West Florissant toward the area, past where Chris Stanford is and to where Julian Johnson is. And right now, as you heard, Julian is fighting some tear gas. It's affected him, and no need to apologize. We don't expect him to be on the air through anything like that. But all the action seems to have shifted down toward Canfield, where Julian Johnson is. The difference is the protesters earlier tonight at Ferguson and West Florissant really seemed more peaceful. They backed off. They followed the advice of gentlemen like the Reverend, the member of the clergy that Matt Cesny talked to, that you see centering your screen right now. But as Julian said, you know, he surmised that the folks down at the other end of West Florissant, where the action is right now, they weren't really interested in peaceful protests. They were interested in some mayhem.
Black church leaders in St. Louis say a man pretending to spread messages of peace is actually behind escalating violence in Ferguson.
Yeah, they're pointing the finger at Malik Shabazz, former leader of the new Black Panther Party. Investigative reporter Chris Negus is live in Ferguson with more on how actual peacekeepers plan to stop Shabazz tonight.
That's right, Steve. This week we have seen Malik Shabazz out here in the streets on West Florissant in Ferguson. He is no stranger to the limelight. He's been very vocal in Ferguson, and now some church leaders in this area are being vocal about kicking him out of Ferguson.
I am upset with a certain group of them that are here that are rebel rousers, and there are a few that are in the crowd. We know them name by name.
Pastor Mike Robinson is part of a growing peacekeeping movement on the streets of Ferguson. At night, his group works to keep angry demonstrators calm, which at times can be an impossible job. Have you been scared out here yet?
Absolutely. Last night was probably the scariest moment of my life.
Robinson says there's growing concern over this man, Malik Zulu Shabazz.
We want the officer Darren Wilson arrested. We're here for Mike Brown, and we're not going to let outside infiltrators come in and destroy our good movement.
But Robinson says Shabazz is an outside infiltrator himself, an attorney from Washington, D.C., who's causing problems.
I literally watched him cause chaos within a large group of people and prepare to send them towards the front line where the police are, and then he shifts and begins to say, oh, let's keep the peace, let's keep the peace.
Robinson doesn't mince words.
We're calling him out. Our group is calling him out. We want him out of our city. We don't need his help. Not at all. He's doing nothing but causing chaos.
According to the Anti-Defamation League, Shabazz is the former leader of the new Black Panther Party and has sought to recast himself as a serious civil rights leader that inserts himself in high-profile, racially charged situations. According to the Southern Poverty Law Center, Shabazz is skilled at organizing provocative protests. Local church leaders say they plan to keep a close eye on Shabazz tonight as they try to keep the peace once again on the streets of Ferguson.
He's one of those gentlemen that's trying to get in the limelight. He wants it to seem as if he is really doing some great work, but we have watched him on several occasions cause controversy.
And back here live, I called Shabazz's Washington, D.C. office today. His office has not returned my call. I have not heard comment from him. Now you can see here comes a protest right now walking down West Florissant. I've got to tell you, this is the most clamped down I've seen this area this week. They are not letting any cars in this area. Pedestrians, of course, still allowed to walk on the street, but they have closed it to street traffic at Lucas and Hunt. That is early in the day, at least the earliest so far that I've seen that. Of course, we'll be out here live tonight to let you know what happens. But for now, reporting live in Ferguson, Chris Negus, News 4.
News 4 investigates asking tough questions today of Missouri's governor. Who should handle the prosecution of the Mike Brown shooting? And did police use tear gas appropriately. And even more, News 4's investigates Craig Cheatham just returned from interviewing Governor Jay Nixon. Craig?
Sharon, my one-on-one interview with the governor is more revealing for the questions he refused to answer directly. We began by talking about whether or not St. Louis County Prosecutor Bob McCullough should be the one to prosecute the investigation into the shooting death of Mike Brown. Did you privately ask Bob McCullough to step out as prosecutor?
No.
Are you going to ask him to step out?
You guys know me. I've issued some pretty dramatic orders this week. For the first time in my memory, bringing in the Highway Patrol and putting them involved in security in a region. So I'm not. Everybody knows me. I'm not that subtle.
Even though Bob McCullough says Governor Nixon can remove him as prosecutor in the Mike Brown case, the law is vague, and Governor Nixon doesn't make it much clearer. McCullough says you're dodging the issue. Are you going to ask him to step out, or are you not? Yes, no question. With all due respect.
If I was going to, I would have.
So you're not going to?
As I said time and time again, everybody needs to do their various jobs and responsibilities, and my job is to do the responsibilities of the job I've defined.
He also declined to say if he has confidence in McCullough. Are you confident that Bob McCullough will prosecute this case thoroughly and fairly?
He has a lot of experience. People of this community elected him, and he's got a lot of experience and a long and deep record.
Governor Nixon discussed police responses to demonstrations. Governor, after your briefings with police, do you believe they used tear gas in an appropriate way?
That on the ground, obviously they've had to make the decisions, and I think they've done a very solid job of dealing with an extremely difficult situation.
Nixon said race, education, poverty, and the role of police all played a role in creating an intense environment during the protests, and that he hopes we learn important lessons from what happened in Ferguson.
Those are big, substantive, difficult, long-term questions that we're gonna continue to talk about and hopefully make some progress on.
The appearance of military-style policing concerned many people. What are your concerns about the so-called militarization of local police?
Well, you're always concerned. You want to have adequate force strength for what needs to get done in public safety, but you don't want to have more. The bottom line is, I think we're all concerned. We don't want to feel like our own streets are occupied. Folks don't want to feel like they're limited in walking outside or speaking up.
So does the governor have the authority to remove McCullough as prosecutor or not? Well, again, the law is vague, but it is clear that the Attorney General's office could assist McCullough's office in the grand jury investigation and at trial if Governor Nixon decides an outside prosecutor should be involved in the case. So McCullough is right on one point. Governor Nixon could play a direct role in deciding who at least helps McCullough prosecute the case. Craig Cheatham, News 4.
Critics of Bob McCullough believe he is biased, in part because his father, a police officer, was killed in the line of duty.
His killer, African American. Mike Colombo digs into the archives to offer some perspective on the tragedy that McCullough admits helped shape his life.
The raw emotion Michael Brown's mother showed the day her son was killed remains one of the most haunting images in this case.
You took my son away from me. You know how hard it was for me to get him to stay in school and graduate.
Her mourning is personal yet public, a rare combination of grief she shares with an unlikely figure. On the night of July 2nd, 1964, 37-year-old St. Louis police officer Paul McCullough was shot dead in the line of duty, responding to a call in the Pruitt-Igoe housing complex. He left behind a wife and 4 children. One of those children grew up to become St. Louis County prosecutor.
All I know and all I heard was, your father's not coming home. I know what that's like. I know the pain that goes with the loss of a loved one to violence.
That traumatic turning point in Bob McCullough's life has become a point of contention. Many believe he can't fairly prosecute the Michael Brown case because of his life experience. Missouri Senator Jamila Nasheed shares those concerns. She wrote this letter to McCullough asking him to appoint a special prosecutor to the case. This isn't the first time McCullough's critics have come calling. He was scrutinized in 2000 for his involvement in what's known as the Jack in the Box case, A grand jury chose not to indict the 2 undercover officers who shot and killed 2 drug suspects outside the Berkeley restaurant. Now, 14 years later and 50 years since his father's killing, McCullough says justice is the only thing he's trying to protect.
I know what it was like to look back and watch my mother grow old and die without the man, the only man she ever loved, at her side. So I know the pain of that, and the fact that he was a police officer and killed in the line of duty had nothing to do with any of that. Did it affect me? Absolutely affected me. And what it did for me is, or to me, was made me I think, a fierce advocate for victims of violence.
New information tonight about the federal investigation of the Ferguson Police Department.
News 4 Investigates has learned representatives from the Department of Justice are inside the police department right now, digging through years of internal records. Investigative reporter Craig Cheatham has more on the federal probe and the police department's policy on deadly force.
Steve and Sharon, we requested copies of the Ferguson Police Department's internal review of Officer Darren Wilson's use of deadly force. But the Ferguson City Attorney told me that the department hasn't finished its required internal investigation of the shooting that killed Mike Brown, and it wouldn't finish it until after federal and county investigations of the shooting are complete.
We are here today to announce.
Last week, U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder announced there would be a sweeping investigation of not only the police shooting of Mike Brown, but also of the Ferguson Police Department itself.
In Ferguson, our investigation will assess the police department's use of force, including deadly force. It will analyze stops, searches, and arrests, and it will examine the treatment of individuals detained at Ferguson's city jail.
Today, the Ferguson City Attorney told me that federal investigators are at the police department right now, digging through years of internal police reports, including more than 4 years of documents examining every time the PD reviewed a case of use of force. The city attorney says those records are unavailable to the public until DOJ is finished with them, which could be at least another month.
What is the use of force policy?
The frustration over the Ferguson PD's policy and the inability to get some records related to it was echoed today by St. Louis City NAACP President Adolphus Pruitt.
What is the policy in the city of Ferguson? Let's find out for ourselves. Produce it, release it, talk about it.
News 4 Investigates asked for the Ferguson use of force policy weeks ago and got it. It's similar to the guidelines at many other police departments. In Ferguson, an officer may use lethal force only when the officer reasonably believes that the action is in defense of human life, including the officer's own life, or in the defense of any person in imminent danger of serious physical injury. The officer should have exhausted every alternative means of apprehension before using deadly force. And lethal force will not be used if there's a clear risk to the safety of a third person.
The Ferguson policy is very clear about when officers are allowed to use deadly force.
UMSL professor David Klinger says the back half of the Ferguson use of deadly force policy also requires that the suspect committed or attempted to commit a felony, and the crime involved the use or threatened use of deadly force, and there's a substantial risk the suspect will kill or seriously hurt someone if he's not stopped.
Basically, what the Ferguson policy says in the back half is that the only reason you're allowed to shoot this violent felon is if you can articulate why you believe that he has to be shot in order to prevent essentially immediate threat to someone else immediately.
Ferguson police say Officer Wilson initially confronted Brown because he was walking in a street. Witnesses and police say after that, Brown and Wilson got into a tussle at the police car. Wilson's gun went off while the officer was still in the car. Witnesses also say Brown ran away but appeared to surrender. A St. Louis County grand jury has been hearing evidence in the case and is expected to complete its investigation by mid-October. Live in the newsroom, Craig Cheatham, News 4.
Since the shooting death of Michael Brown, Ferguson officials are struggling to comply with a flood of records requests from across the country.
The city is required by law to make an effort to provide those records. News 4 has learned that the biggest request is not from the media or a private citizen. It comes from the federal government. News 4 investigative reporter Craig Cheatham is in the newsroom to explain.
Sharon and Steve, this is the 9-page blueprint for the federal investigation of the Ferguson Police Department. In it, the Department of Justice is requesting detailed records for investigations, policies, and even individual officers and civilian employees. The focus is on finding out what's wrong with the department, then trying to come up with a plan to fix it. The deadly police shooting of Mike Brown and the tactics used to control the crowd of demonstrators in Ferguson gained international attention and sparked two separate investigations by the U.S. Department of Justice, one focusing on the shooting and a deeper probe of the department itself.
In Ferguson, our investigation will assess the police department's use of force, including deadly force. It will analyze stops, searches, and arrests, and it will examine the treatment of individuals detained at Ferguson's city jail.
This 9-page request is the blueprint for U.S. Attorney General Holder's investigation of the Ferguson PD. It asks for detailed records for every officer and civilian worker employed by the Ferguson Police Department since January 1, 2010. The request also asks for more than a decade worth of incident reports, complaints, and investigations for all officer-involved shootings and all uses of force and custody cases that resulted in a death.
I mean, they're going to learn everything.
Washington University law professor Peter Joy says the investigation will likely lead to major changes.
It causes everybody, not just in the police department, but in the municipal government, to pay attention to these kinds of issues in a way that they've never done before.
The Department of Justice request also asks for a detailed breakdown of all traffic citations, warrants issued, stops, and detentions, and will examine the age and race of defendants and police officers. A similar investigation was used to bring reforms to the Las Vegas Police Department.
They help you identify your deficiencies. You agree with those, and if you don't, you talk about it. You become a more professional police organization.
In Ferguson, the DOJ will also focus on the accountability for employees who violate rules, with a special emphasis on what happens to those accused of racial profiling and excessive use of force.
Depending on what comes out of it, it can lead to real reform.
The Ferguson City Attorney says the Department of Justice has already made additional requests for information. We have a copy of the DOJ's letter on our website, KMOV.com. Live in the newsroom, Craig Cheatham, News 4.
News 4 giving you a live look from Ferguson. Protesters have shut down South Florissant. Signs reading "Racism lives here."
Yeah, we have a crew on scene. This coming after the Ferguson police chief offered this apology earlier today.
I want to say this to the Brown family. No one who has not experienced the loss of a child can understand what you're feeling. I'm truly sorry for the loss of your son.
That apology made by Ferguson Police Chief Tom Jackson to the family of Michael Brown.
Yeah, the chief posting a video online, taking accountability for all those hours Brown's body was left on scene, and to peaceful protesters who felt they've been harassed by police. Now, many people are questioning the timing of the apology, given it's coming nearly 2 months after the Michael Brown shooting. So today, I sat down exclusively with Jackson one-on-one to find out why now and what his future in Ferguson will be.
The most important thing to me is that I got this off my chest. It needed to be said, and you know, people can take it however they want. It's sincere, and I hope the people, some of the people out there will realize that and take it for what it's worth. It's just an apology. That's all it is. I'm also sorry that it took so long to remove Michael from the street. But in the end, that was me. I was the commander on the scene, and I let that happen, and I'm sorry that I did.
What about releasing that surveillance video in the convenience store? Yeah. Has that weighed on you?
Yeah, sure. Anything that we do that relates to this is going to have an impact. Always, we We don't want to have a negative impact.
Jackson addressed rumors, word on the street he's connected to the officer who shot and killed Michael Brown.
There are also rumors out there that you have a personal relationship. You were friends with this officer, that you've been protecting him, Darren Wilson. Is that true?
I met Darren Wilson when he was hired. I didn't know him prior to that. And no, we don't have any personal relationship beyond the professional one, me as his chief.
And what about reports officers in the Ferguson PD, perhaps other agencies, were sporting bracelets in support of Wilson earlier this week during another night of unrest?
We're looking into that.
With reports, the grand jury investigation of the circumstances of Michael Brown's death might come back in less than 6 weeks. Jackson promises his officers will be ready to act responsibly.
Do you have a plan in place regardless of what that decision is?
Yes, we do. And really the Unified Command is meeting to put together a plan that's going to involve all the area police departments in one role or another. So we are really, I think, as prepared as we can possibly be for any result.
I did ask Jackson if he plans to step down. He tells me he has no such plans and looks forward to working with residents to repair the relationship between the community and police.
Reports that you were carrying a gun last night when you were arrested?
I'm done commenting. I'm done.
Is that true?
A state senator arrested and on the run from our camera. What she had to say when News 4 caught up with her. Hello, everyone. New developments tonight in the case of Missouri State Senator Jamila Nasheed being arrested during Ferguson protests.
Tonight, we know the senator had a fully loaded 9mm gun when she was arrested, along with extra ammo. We've also learned police believe Senator Nasheed had been drinking and that she refused to take a breathalyzer. News 4 was the first to bring you this story on News 4 at noon. Alyssa Reitmeyer tracked the senator down to ask her about these allegations against her. Alyssa.
Well, Sharon and Jasmine, when I followed Senator Nasheed to her car to ask about those police reports that she was carrying a gun, she would only comment to me that she has a concealed carry permit. Well, since then, Ferguson police spokesperson Tim Zoll went on the record with me saying that in addition to carrying a fully loaded semi-automatic weapon, the senator had 8 additional rounds on her when she was arrested.
No justice! No peace!
Senator Jamila Nasheed tells News 4 she went to Ferguson protests last night with the intention of getting arrested.
Sometimes you have to break the law. Civil disobedience is breaking the law. And if you're doing it for a cause, there's nothing wrong with it.
News 4 has learned Ferguson police requested St. Anne Jail, where Nasheed was transported, perform a breathalyzer test based on suspicion she may have been under the influence when she was brought into custody.
According to officers on the scene, the senator had a very strong smell of an intoxicant at the time of her arrest.
But both Ferguson and St. Anne police tell News 4 the senator refused to take the test. She strongly denied she was drunk last night when trying to dodge our questions upon her release this morning.
Were you intoxicated when you were arrested last night?
No. Not at all.
Meanwhile, the fully loaded 9mm and those 8 additional rounds taken from the senator when she was arrested are now in the hands of the St. Louis County Firearms Section for routine testing to see if the gun has been recently fired.
If she had a concealed carry permit, why would it have been seized?
If she had a concealed carry permit, I'm sure she would have shown it to the officers.
The senator was formally charged with 2 ordinance violations this morning. She'll go to court for those on January 15th. Meanwhile, the Ferguson City Attorney will review the possibility for any alcohol or weapons-related charges. Live in the newsroom, Alyssa Reitmeyer, News 4.
Now, many of you may be asking tonight, why would a state senator bring a loaded gun to a peaceful protest, reportedly with the intent of being arrested? The state senator no longer talking, but a local activist is answering that question. It's coming up all new on News 4 at 6.
Under fire for taking advantage of mostly low-income black residents, Ferguson Municipal Court was back in session today, and News 4 Investigates was there. Ferguson City Court has made changes, getting rid of some fees and automatic arrest warrants issued for failing to show up to court for minor traffic cases.
But even after more than 2 months of protests, some things have not changed. News 4 Investigates' Craig Cheatham spent the day in court.
Sharon and Steve, last year the city of Ferguson collected $2.6 million in fines and fees from thousands of residents. It was the city's second biggest source of money.
Do you want time to hire an attorney, or do you want me to just set this for trial now?
In Ferguson Municipal Court, the docket is dominated by traffic violations and minor drug cases.
It's continued November 25th. She'll give a reminder, okay?
LaRon Sladen says he's still dealing with a 5-year-old traffic case because he's been bouncing from job to job and has to make tough choices about what bills he should pay first.
You have to pay what you need to pay at home prior to paying what you need to pay for the courts. So if I have to choose, I'm paying my bills compared to paying my court fees.
It's a common struggle. Cases that can include a half-dozen citations for one traffic stop can quickly add up to thousands of dollars for some defendants, who often fail to show up in court because they fall behind on their bills, then have warrants issued for their arrest because they fail to appear in court. That happened to Mr. Sladen.
A person can't afford it.
Ferguson and other communities in North St. Louis County have been widely criticized for collecting so much money through fines and court fees. Last year, Ferguson, a city of 21,000, issued nearly 33,000 warrants for nonviolent offenses. Many of them were for traffic cases like LaRon Sladen's.
We're not looking to reach into their pocket. We're not looking to give everybody convictions. That's not the purpose of this court or any court.
What is the purpose of this court?
To see that the laws are enforced fair and reasonably to everybody, regardless of race or creed or whatever, you know.
Today in Ferguson's court, we noticed something else, that all 17 of the city court employees were white. The judge, the 3 prosecutors, the cops, and the clerks. Nearly 9 out of 10 defendants were black.
Well, I think it sends a bad signal. I agree with you totally on that.
Municipal Court Judge Ron Brockmeyer says Ferguson has become a more sensitive court, eliminating some fees and no longer issuing warrants for people who fail to appear in court for minor cases. But we wondered how a community could go through this and still not seem to understand the signals received by many residents of a mostly black city when they see this.
We do have black officers that are in our court. There's just none in here today. And we used to have a black clerk, but she became a black officer, so we did have a black clerk who used to sit up there, but she's now a black officer.
It's a very strong first impression.
Yeah, it is. I don't really want to touch on that subject, but no, I don't want to talk about that.
Do people in the community talk much about it?
Of course. I mean, every day.
The public defender group Arch City Defenders identified 3 North St. Louis County municipal courts, Ferguson, Florissant, and Bell Ridge, as chronic offenders at violating fundamental rights of the poor and undermining public confidence in the judicial system. Ron Brockmeyer, the judge in Ferguson and Breckenridge Hills, is also the prosecutor in Florissant, Delwood, and Veneta Park. He insists all of the courtrooms where he practices for municipal courts are fair. Craig Cheatham, News 4.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm Sharon Reed. Today, a special community conversation. This past week, there's been a lot of talk, a lot of rumors out there about the impending release of the grand jury announcement in the Michael Brown killing. While we do not have a date or time yet, community leaders are clearly getting ready. Early last week, Missouri Governor Jay Nixon joined leaders of the Unified Command to talk about preparations for the announcement. Here's Craig Cheatham.
As I've said before, violence will not be tolerated. The residents and businesses of this region will be protected.
Those strong words coming from Missouri Governor Jay Nixon last week. The governor saying state and local officials are preparing to keep peace and order when the grand jury decision in the Michael Brown shooting is announced.
You took my son away from me. You know how hard it was for me to get him to stay in school and graduate. You know how many black men graduate? Not many.
It's now been more than 3 months since 18-year-old Michael Brown Jr. was shot and killed by Ferguson police officer Darren Wilson. Brown was unarmed. In the days after the shooting, there was rioting and looting in Ferguson.
Don't shoot!
There have also been ongoing peaceful demonstrations across the city and county. Now, with all signs indicating the grand jury's decision is near, the region is tense.
We will not let Mike Brown rest until we get justice. No peace.
Some residents are worried, even frightened. The governor says police are preparing for a dual role, protecting the community and respecting protesters' rights.
Families must be able to see their kids off safely to school in the morning, walk their neighborhoods at night, and keep the doors of their businesses open without fear for their lives or property. Citizens must also have the right to express themselves peacefully without being threatened by individuals intent on creating violence and disorder. The world is watching.
Again, our Craig Cheatham reporting. Right now, we do not know the jury's decision, but it could happen at any time. And when it does, of course, we will bring it to you live. Still, we know many of you are worried. You are wondering, what are police doing to get ready? So during the next half hour, you will hear from leaders of the Unified Command together. They're all right here with us. So much at stake, protecting citizens, demonstrators, and property. Captain Ron Johnson, Missouri Highway Patrol, Chief Sam Johnson, City Police, and also Chief John Belmar with St. Louis County Police. Let's start with you, Captain Johnson. Governor Nixon's press conference clearly meant to send a message. Violence will not be tolerated, but the how, so few details. I know you can't tell us everything about the tactics, but what can you provide people who are so worried out there?
I think the first part of the governor's message is to our citizens, that they will be able to exercise their rights to free speech, they're able to protest, but also those in our community, they're going to remain safe. And he wants to make sure that this community is safe, this community remains whole. But then on the second part of that was that we are going to make sure that people don't get out and destroy this community. And those that come out for criminal behavior, we're going to make sure that that's not allowed, so the businesses remain whole and the homes remain safe.
You all got some praise. You got some criticism too. Chief Belmar, you on this one. What can you say to people who did not like the policing tactics? What have you learned? What did you hear? What will be different?
You know, I think what's lost in some of this is the amount of time that the three of us spent engaging the community each evening. The protesters, shaking hands, taking pictures. You know, it took about 2 hours a night. We did that for probably 16, 17, 18 nights in a row. Made friends down there. We don't see continuous loops of that all the time because, again, that's perhaps more ordinary. But I would tell you that what I would say is we hope we never have to utilize those tactics again. But we also hope that we have peaceful protesters, that we can keep people safe, we can protect property, we can allow people to express their First Amendment rights. And it doesn't spiral out of control such as it did last time, to where we don't have to use those remarkable tactics and pieces of equipment.
But Chief Dodson, there's the hope, and then there's the reality. Do you feel like you made friends down there, that you can separate the peaceful demonstrators from those who want to agitate and work up the situation?
Absolutely. As John said, it started on the West Florissant corridor, but it continues as recently as the drive here today. We're talking to organizers of protests daily on the telephone, saying, what can we do to allow you to have your voices heard, but keep the community safe at the same time? We both want that. Both sides want that. We're building bridges every day. So what I would say is we have great plans to keep the community safe, to protect businesses, and to support the people that want to have their voices heard. And even the people that want to have their voices heard realize that when the criminal element comes out, they have to help us police our community.
Hello, everyone. I'm Sharon Reed.
And I'm Steve Savard. This is a News 4 special report. In about 1 hour, we will hear the grand jury's decision in the deadly shooting of Mike Brown by Ferguson police officer Darren Wilson.
We will bring you live coverage for the next hour as we prepare for the announcement. Let's go live, a live look into the St. Louis County courtroom. We are awaiting the prosecutor, Bob McCullough.
Just a few hours ago, McCullough's office announced it was ready to release the grand jury decision in the Michael Brown shooting investigation. News 4 has live team coverage of today's announcement.
Our news crews fanning out from Clayton to Ferguson. They're ready to get all the reaction for you on this announcement. We'll also have a special News 4 Investigate studio up and running right now. They are getting ready to comb through any testimony or documents released by McCullough's office.
And outside the county courthouse in Clayton, News 4 Investigates Chris Negus is stationed live while Deanna Zoga's inside the courtroom awaiting the decision. Let's start with Chris. And Chris, it's been quiet throughout the early part of the evening. What's the situation in Clayton there now?
Steve, I've got to tell you, the situation remains unchanged here in Clayton. It's quiet out here. The streets are blocked off. I'm standing here on Carondelet at South Central, where the intersection is closed to traffic. There are a lot of barricades that have been put up, but there have been no problems here at the St. Louis County Justice Center tonight. Now, that announcement will take place up here on the 3rd floor. Steve, as you mentioned, my colleague Deanna Zoga is inside. She will be there when that decision is handed down, when we learn what the grand jury decided in this case. I talked to police a short time ago. They say there have been no problems out here tonight. The reaction from the businesses out here, it's mixed. Some of them closed early. Some of them remain open at this hour and say they will remain open unless there are any problems out here. But they're hoping that there are no issues out here around the Justice Center tonight. I've seen police in the area, of course. I also saw what appeared to be about a dozen members of the Missouri National Guard. They entered the Justice Center around 6 o'clock tonight. As we heard the governor say, they would be here for a support role throughout this process. So we did see some of those Guard members enter this facility. We'll remain on the ground, and we will be outside as this situation continues to develop here in Clayton. But for now, reporting live, Chris Negus, News 4.
A live look again from Sky Zoom 4 over the scene in Ferguson. This is near the intersection of Airport and Florissant. This is just a little bit north of the Ferguson Police Department. We have seen more and more protesters gathering in the last hour or so at this location. Sky Zoom 4 on the scene live right now.
So protesters in the street. Our Matt Cesney is not far, about a quarter of a mile from here. Actually, this location is closer to City Hall. Of course, these protesters have been meeting. They've been coordinating over social media, and they promised a response this in advance of the grand jury announcement in just under 1 hour.
All this leading up to that grand jury announcement coming up, expected at about 8 o'clock from St. Louis County Prosecutor Bob McCullough. And again, we're going to stay on the air through McCullough's announcement to bring you comprehensive coverage of this highly anticipated decision.
It has been, of course, more than 3 months since the shooting death of Michael Brown. A lot of information has been made public about that day in August, as well as the 18-year-old. Brown, who lived with his grandmother in the Canfield Apartments, was walking down West Florissant Avenue with a friend when Officer Darren Wilson approached the men. After a brief confrontation, Brown was shot and killed. He appeared to be unarmed at the time.
Toxicology reports indicated traces of marijuana in Brown's system. According to his family, Brown had just graduated high school and was scheduled to start classes at Vatterott College the Monday following his shooting.
Much less, though, has been made public about the officer, Darren Wilson. Few images of him have ever been released. This picture of him, it's from February, when he was presented an award from Ferguson Chief of Police Tom Jackson.
Now, we do know Wilson is a 6-year veteran of the various police forces. In fact, he served 2 years in the Jennings Police Department and spent the past 4 years in the Ferguson Police Department. He's remained on paid administrative leave since the shooting, and despite many Brown supporters calling for his arrest.
So the grand jury has reached a decision, but they've been reviewing evidence in the Michael Brown shooting case for weeks.
Yeah, we're now less than an hour away from hearing their decision. Here's what they have to decide: whether or not there's enough evidence to indict Officer Wilson.
We're going to look into each of the possible charges as well as Wilson's defense in more detail in just a moment. But first, we look back at the events of the last few months which have led up to tonight.
August 9th, just after noon, Mike Brown was walking in the middle of West Florissant Avenue when Officer Darren Wilson approached Brown and his friend. Moments later, Wilson would end up shooting the 18-year-old just outside the Canfield Apartments. Tensions rose as Brown's body lay in the street for hours.
We would come to learn the Ferguson Police Department was waiting on assistance from St. Louis County Police and the coroner. County officers had spent the day in South County dealing with a gunman inside St. Anthony's Hospital.
An armed intruder, armed with a handgun. He was also wearing a ski mask.
Meanwhile, back in Ferguson, hundreds gathered along the streets of Canfield throughout the evening and into Sunday, all while tensions mounted. The next day, police hold a press conference and announce Brown attacked Wilson before he was fatally shot.
Within the police car, there was a struggle over the officer's weapon. There was at least one shot fired within the car.
That night, a peaceful vigil turned violent, followed by violent night after violent night.
Don't be a traitor to Michael Brown.
in the name of you, man.
By August 11th, national civil rights leaders, including the Reverend Al Sharpton, were in town to meet with Brown's family.
It was Thursday, August 14th, when President Obama addressed the nation on the events in Ferguson.
There is never an excuse for violence against police or for those who would use this tragedy as a cover for vandalism or looting. There's also no excuse for police to use excessive force against peaceful protests.
No justice, no peace.
Meanwhile, the protests continue. Governor Nixon announces a change to the security detail. Captain Ron Johnson of the Highway Patrol is now the man in charge.
I plan on tonight myself walking to the quick trip that has been called Ground Zero and meeting with the folks there myself tonight. And so we are going to have a different approach and have the approach that we're in this together.
But the following day, August 15th, tensions rise again. Ferguson police released the name of Officer Wilson, but not before also releasing the images of Mike Brown involved in a robbery just minutes before the shooting.
It pissed them off. It pissed them off, and for one reason it did, because it muddied the water.
On Saturday, August 16th, Governor Nixon declares a state of emergency. The National Guard arrives Monday. Tensions mount again as St. Louis police shoot and kill a man armed with a knife just a few miles from Ferguson.
He got his gun out.
Almost a week after the president's national address on Ferguson, U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder arrives in St. Louis. He's briefed on the federal investigations in the shooting of Mike Brown.
And if we get community involvement, we can turn it around, allow people to express themselves, as that's what we do in the United States.
Tensions and protests start to ease before Brown is laid to rest on Monday, August 25th.
This is about justice. This is about fairness.
Since Michael Brown's funeral, we've seen protests inside St. Louis County government.
If Darren Wilson get off this case, y'all better bring out every army in the city, because it's going down.
Angry mobs gathering in the Shaw neighborhood after an off-duty St. Louis officer shot and killed an armed teenager.
What you doing here, bro? Get the f*** out of here, man, with your coward boys. With your coward terrorists. Get the f*** out of here.
And continued calls for a decision from the grand jury.
This is different. This is being handled differently than most cases,
which for the past months have only been hearing evidence on this case.
And we will hear from Bob McCullough inside that St. Louis County courtroom in under 1 hour now. News 4 has spent months investigating the issues and controversies that have arisen in the wake of that August day. One of the key questions in this case, whether Officer Wilson will be charged.
Now that we'll find out shortly, but we've looked into the ranges of charges that he could face. In a report we first aired in August, News 4 investigative reporter Craig Cheatham discovered it's unusual for police to be charged criminally in shootings.
I think the most important thing is that to try to get this right.
Washington University law professor Peter Joy says the grand jury investigation into the shooting of Mike Brown, which could last up to 2 months, appears to be designed to get as much evidence as possible.
I don't think it would be fair to fault any prosecutor for waiting until they believe that they had all of the facts, because like I said, you don't want to rush into something with maybe some really critical piece of evidence still out there.
Joy says pressure from some protesters for a faster investigation isn't fair. He says when prosecutor Bob McCullough said that the grand jury may not reach a decision until mid-October, it was an indication that the prosecutor is committed to a thorough investigation that will likely include many witnesses.
Instead of maybe having a head detective summarize statements that people have given, it sounds like they're going to take a lot of live testimony.
Joy says grand juries often find police credible, and Officer Darren Wilson's fear would be a critical factor in the decision to indict or not to indict him.
If Mr. Brown was, say, 30 feet away from the police officer with his hands up surrendering, well then, it'd be hard to imagine any scenario that would say, well, the police officer could credibly say, I was still in fear for my life. On the other hand, if there was a struggle over the gun or Mr. Brown was rushing the police officer, that's a whole different story.
He says if the grand jury finds that Officer Wilson walked up to Mike Brown after Brown surrendered, then shot and killed him, Wilson could be charged with murder. Wilson also could be charged with manslaughter for recklessly causing Brown's death, even if he didn't premeditatedly intend to kill him. But if the grand jury believes Brown charged the cop and refused to follow orders to stop, it's likely there would be no indictment.
News 4 Investigates. Craig Cheatham reporting there. He's been taking that deeper look at the case from the beginning, and now a live look once again at Airport and Florissant in Ferguson. Protesters on the move. A short time ago, we saw them converge at the intersection there, even locking arms. One car, presumably demonstrators, circling with an American flag.
But no unrest at this point, no arrests, no confrontations or clashes at this point. Should be noted, too, we've seen demonstrators in this area of Ferguson gathering in the last hour, but where Robin Smith is on West Florissant, really no activity in the 6 o'clock hour, and very little activity outside the St. Louis County Justice Center, where Chris Nagus is stationed live as well. So most of what we're seeing here is occurring from the Sky Zoom 4 live shot in the vicinity of Airport Road in Florissant.
And remember the rules of engagement. We've brought you so much information about over the past several weeks. Police and demonstrator protest groups working together. They've agreed to certain things. And Governor Jay Nixon, live on our air during the 5 o'clock hour, said tolerance, mutual respect, and restraint would all be preserved, even the National Guard in a supporting role.
Should be noted, though, earlier in a press conference late last week, Mayor Slay said that the Unified Command's charge will be to protect constitutional rights and demonstrators' right to protest. However, they said very strongly, violence will not be tolerated. I want to make sure people didn't misunderstand what I was saying. Airport, it's about the intersection of Airport and Florissant, not in Florissant, in Ferguson, near the intersection of Airport and Florissant.
Now, News 4 has been planning for today for quite some time, so we set up a special studio to track this decision and break it down for you as the details come in.
Right now, we want to check in with Craig Cheatham live in that News 4 Investigate studio. He's with Beth Orwick with the St. Louis Circuit Attorney's Office, who can better explain the range of charges. Craig?
Steve and Sharon, Beth has been the chief trial assistant for a dozen years for the Circuit Attorney's Office, and I guess one of the first things I would like to talk about is how long this grand jury investigation has taken. It's taken 3 months. Granted, they've only met once a week throughout much of their investigation, but how unusual is it for a grand jury to take this long?
Well, I've been at the Circuit Attorney's Office for 12 years. I've been the chief trial assistant since June. But as far as it being unusual, it's an investigation. It's different than a traditional grand jury. They were held over, if you will, and then charged with doing this investigation. So the fact that it's taken 3 months, I wouldn't necessarily say is unusual. I would say that it is different, though.
We've heard a lot about the role of Bob McCullough in this. Some of the protesters have criticized his involvement in it as a prosecutor. How much of a role does a prosecutor take in the discovery of evidence for the grand jury, in the presentation of evidence as well?
Well, it's up to the individual prosecutor. I know when I'm in the grand jury, I generally like to have a police officer testify first and kind of set the stage for the rest of the witnesses that are going to testify. But a lot of times it really just depends on scheduling, on people's availability. It's very practical things. And so as much as we can, we like to try to set a framework, but sometimes it doesn't always work.
We've heard that the grand jury can actually essentially take control of the way evidence is brought in. For example, a grand jury can say, we'd like to hear more from this witness, or we'd like to see that again. Does that happen?
It does, especially in a grand jury investigation. They can actually ask to hear from specific people or to see specific evidence. And as a prosecutor, we are ethically bound to try to make that happen for them. We need to ask.
So what type of witnesses and what type of evidence would be presented in a case like this?
Well, in a case like this, I would expect that the grand jury would hear from police officers. They would hear from the police officers that are initially on the scene. They would hear from detectives who did the follow-up investigation. I would think they would hear from evidence technician officers, people who are on the scene collecting physical evidence, and I would think they would hear about what physical evidence was actually collected. We're talking about pieces of clothing or firearms or bullets or shell casings, things like that. I would think that they would hear from the medical examiner, and I think we've actually heard through the media that 2 different medical examiners have testified. And through the medical examiner, hear about the autopsy and perhaps even see the autopsy report. I'm not there in the room, but I think they would also hear about DNA, fingerprints, and then they would hear from witnesses. People's accounts and what they remember, what they saw, what they observed, and I think that the grand jurors would really listen to that evidence.
We've also heard that Darren Wilson testified, perhaps for as long as 4 hours. How unusual is it for a defendant to testify at a grand jury?
It's pretty unusual, actually. They are absolutely allowed to testify in front of the grand jury. They can't bring their attorney, but it is pretty unusual. I think it makes a lot of sense, though, if you think about it, why someone might want to actually come in and testify. It's a good chance for them to get out their defense if they have one and let the grand jury know that early so they can take that into consideration.
But as a prosecutor, wouldn't you want a defendant to testify before the grand jury? Doesn't that limit the defendant to that story that he or she presents to the grand jury?
You're exactly right.
It would seem to give them little wiggle room. It would actually seem to work against them.
It depends. Everything is so fact specific, and I don't know the facts of this case. But I do know it once someone testifies in the grand jury, it's going to be hard to change your story. So you are right in that respect.
Now, the grand jurors were not sequestered, which means that they were able to go home. Again, presumably, many of them worked, so they would return to their jobs and not just their families. They would also have access to all of the information that the media has presented. How do you control that as a prosecutor? What kind of an order would the judge order them to not look at information like that? And how do you enforce something like that anyway?
Well, the judge could. I know in traditional juries who decide guilt or innocence, the judge can often make an order saying, do not check Twitter tonight, look on Facebook, don't listen to Channel 4, if you will. But it'd be very difficult to enforce, especially in a case like this because the grand jury has been meeting for so long. How do you put that aside? There are rules of evidence, and the rules of evidence for a grand jury states that they should only consider the evidence that they are listening to in that grand jury room. So the evidence that they hear are what should be used to guide their deliberations.
We heard rumors weeks ago about a possible leak on the grand jury. McCullough's office determined that the leak did not occur. But leaking grand jury evidence is a pretty serious issue, and it actually could lead to a criminal charge. How big of a deal is that? I mean, is that something that is basically pounded into this grand jury over and over and over again?
It's pretty huge. I mean, it's a big deal. The grand jury is built on the foundation that it is secret. And there's a lot of good reasons for having that secrecy. You want the grand jurors to feel free to deliberate and to listen to that evidence without having the public pressure or media pressure on them. You want the witnesses to be able to go in there and actually take that oath that they take and swear to be secret and tell the honest truth. And I believe that happens. When you take that oath and you know there's that secrecy, it increases the amount of honesty.
Beth, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Appreciate it very much.
The family perhaps would learn before the rest of the world.
Again, a live look at the Justice Center. There is St. Louis County Prosecutor Bob McCullough. He's going to make the announcement of the grand jury's decision. Let's take that live.
They determined that no probable cause exists to file any charge against Officer Wilson and returned a no true bill on each of the 5 indictments.
Let's get to you, Matt, on the scene. Give us the context. Exactly what have you seen?
Yeah, Sharon, we're looking at the armored vehicles again of the, we believe to be the St. Louis County Police, the same ones we saw back in August down on West Florissant. They are slowly making their way up South Florissant towards the police department. You're mentioning, Steve, we did see some gas and smoke in the air. We suspect that was tear gas. We're not quite sure. From where we are and where the wind was blowing, that gas seemed to disperse rather quickly, and it never reached us up here. We also saw what looked like fireworks flying in the air. This is also the area, I should mention, where we thought we had heard shots being fired earlier, just before the president started speaking. We can hear police on the loudspeaker asking people to disperse. A large portion of the crowd was down there. There's a few rows of shops and stores and restaurants down in that part of South Florissant in Ferguson, just about a quarter mile from the police department. A lot of the crowd that was down there has been driven back up here towards the police department. For a short time, we actually had seen the street here been clear with traffic moving. Now that's stopped again because most of the people are back in the street. It looks as if those armored vehicles are in a holding position and stopping right now.
There's something on fire right now. Let's see if we can, I can't really tell what that is, but they're burning something right now off to the side of the road. I can't tell exactly what it is, but the fire is pretty intense from where we stand.
Whatever it is, it's fully engulfed.
That's at the corner of, that's at the corner of South Florissant and Spot Drive. I can't tell what it is. We really don't want to get much closer to it, but it's going pretty heavy.
Let me go back to the question. We can keep the camera focused on that, but you mentioned some people intercepted the looters and stopped the looting. Any idea if they had any connection to that business, Beauty World?
No, it doesn't seem so. There's a lot of peaceful protesters out here that don't want to see things turn violent. So I'm thinking that that was truly some of the peaceful people who saw what was going on and wanted to stop it. I've seen that scene happen before where there were people going into stores looting, and there were some of the peaceful people out here trying to keep the peace and stopping some of the looters from running into storefronts. We're hearing a lot more loud booms, some gunshots in the background at this time as well.
Yeah, if you think that was a gunshot, it was hard for us to hear from in here. You're on the scene. Any doubt in your mind, please take cover.
Yeah, there was
a
loud boom first there, Steve. And we're hearing more police announcements over the loudspeaker telling people to get out of the middle of the road. You'll be subject to arrest. The usual stuff we've been hearing. We heard a loud boom, which could have been a tear gas canister, and then another, I believe, a gunshot.
Julia, we are learning more from police. The police account via social media and beyond. A peaceful protester hit in the face, according to police, with a piece of concrete. Police say they are not deploying tear gas. They're using smoke, they say, to break up unruly crowds. That appears to be a St. Louis County police vehicle on fire there, if I see it correctly. Our crews have confirmed as well shots fired across from the Ferguson Police Department and south of the Ferguson Police Department. Looting, our crews have confirmed. Isolated so far that we know of, Beauty World, as well as a mobile store, the window busted out there.
That car is fully engulfed in flames, as you see from Sky Zoom 4 on the left side of your screen. That is the fire and the smoke I assume we were seeing from Jillian's point of view, although there are no cars around that. It's hard to tell. It's hard to get an idea of depth perception from the ground. You don't see how far away things are, and it's difficult. St. Louis police also tweeting that you saw the scene from Ray Preston, his live report. Grand at I-44 is currently closed.
Sharon, I can tell you right now, the police remain here in front of the police department. A small group of protesters here remain. But I can tell you what's going on down South Florissant Road. If we can swing this way, there's a car on fire. I can see another fire further on down the street. So the chaos is very close to where we are right now. St. Louis County Police and the Missouri Highway Patrol remain stationed here right in front of the Ferguson Police Department and Fire Department. They are kind of in a hold and standing position with their armored vehicle here, the police in their riot gear. Not many protesters are here. They were driven away by all of the tear gas that was dispersed throughout this street within the last hour. There is still a trace of that tear gas in the air, but that also has been moved out by the breeze, but not many protesters have returned here. We have heard reports about some windows being broken and some looting going on in this immediate area of Ferguson. At least one strip mall that's across the street from the police department has had one window broken. We can't have any idea as to what kind of arrests or what kind of injuries may have occurred.
Part of I-44 has been shut down now for protesters.
Steve, it happened just a few minutes ago. Interstate 44, both eastbound and westbound, is now shut down. Go ahead and take a look for yourself. Again, we are at Grand and I-44. You can hear the police sirens. Police are moving into some sort of position, I suppose. I don't know what their plan is now. Now, this is something people were afraid would happen this evening, because what happened was the group had gathered first at Grand and Shaw. There was some chanting. There's a little bit of, there were a few comments made. Then the group marched south down there to Hartford, in Grand, which is the business district there on South Grand. One young man with a bullhorn said that we are going to march up and down as long as police will let us in the streets. We're going to stay in the streets if it looks like someone may be injured, or if they won't let us march in the streets anymore. He said we will then move on to the sidewalk so everybody is safe. Then the group started marching back up north here again, and then this time they went beyond Shaw and they went all the way to Interstate 44. They spilled out onto the highway. Thankfully, no one was injured when the crowd went onto the highway, but you can see there's an 18-wheeler down there. There's a couple other vehicles stopped as well. So far, no one is assaulting or pounding on the cars or anything like that we can see. But you can see, hey, Brian, you've seen the westbound traffic there now. They are gathered around the car, hands up. There's chanting. We're still waiting to see if there's any sort of reaction from the police. Obviously, police do not want this to go on for very long at all. I'm seeing, Brian can look way down there, I'm seeing someone now turning around on the interstate. He was headed west, and now he just did a U-turn on the interstate. Now he or she is going back the other way. You can hear the chanting. We've got a couple of the demonstrators down there by the 18-wheeler. I think we can see that they are standing on a rooftop of a vehicle as well. Now we don't know, that might be someone involved with this highway shutdown even. I mean, it's possible that some of the drivers were in cahoots with the crowd and they may have slowed down traffic and then brought it to a stop to allow the demonstrators to go onto the highway itself.
That's the scene in South St. Louis where Ray Preston's reporting live. You see protesters blocking I-44. I want to take you back to Ferguson. Sky Zoom 4 has been over the scene of Ferguson all evening.
What they're trying to do is part the way so that people won't be on the road. But right now, South Florissant has been totally shut down. And again, people are just here shouting, hands up, don't shoot. It's been peaceful so far. We did have a gentleman, though, who was injured about a block away from here. They had to bring an ambulance in. The gentleman apparently told other witnesses that they forced him out of his car. They left him on the ground with oxygen. We saw the ambulance come in to address that. But other than that incident, we really haven't seen any injuries. But again, that flame continues to burn. That car continues to burn straight down the street here behind me. I don't know if we can zoom in past these people to see it. And again, this has just been a crowd talking and chanting.
We're looking at live scenes on 44 on your right. We're in the Grand and 44 area where protesters have blocked traffic, stopped traffic. The scene on the left from Sky Zoom 4 over a Walgreens in Ferguson.
That's a Little Caesars.
That's a Little Caesars on fire. I'm sorry. We've seen the Walgreens. That's Little Caesars. We've seen multiple fires in Ferguson. We've seen at least 2 cars on fire in Ferguson as well. This coming just a couple of hours after the announcement made by St. Louis County Prosecutor Bob McCullough, announcing that the grand jury in the investigation of the Michael Brown shooting found no reason to indict, did not find probable cause to indict Officer Darren Wilson on any of the 5 charges he could have faced.
We have crews throughout the area, and I do mean everyone is being tapped tonight. And we have someone working to get to this location, that Little Caesars restaurant, now fully engulfed in flames. And I do not see fire crews on the scene yet. They're taxed. We know they're at Walgreens. We've had 2 reports of car fires, potentially more. So they are stretched tonight and working to maneuver around demonstrators, perhaps too, who have shut down parts of 44. Parts of South Grand also shut down.
Yeah, we saw businesses as far back as 2 or 3 weeks ago boarding up, bracing for the grand jury announcement. We did the story, some businesses didn't want to board up, but they were forced to do so by their insurance companies who said if you don't do it, if you don't follow our advice, we may not cover you should something happen. We saw this kind of thing go on in August. This Little Caesars is now fully engulfed. Meanwhile, Julian Johnson has changed locations. He's moved to the scene of that raging fire at the Little Caesars location. And Julian, we see that firefighters have arrived. They started to fight that fire, but they are clearly losing the battle at this point.
Steve, this thing is really going at this point. Yeah, they have about 2 or 3 hoses on it right now, but the fire is still going really, really strong. This is happening near the corner of South Florissant and Airport Road, just across the street from that Walgreens, if you're familiar with this area. And this fire is very intense. It's given off a lot of heat at this point. Firefighters arrived on the scene just a short time ago to try to get a handle on it. But as you said, it's not a winning battle at this point for them. There's a lot of onlookers that have come out here, not protesters, just people standing around and taking this all in. It's an almost surreal scene out here because just a short while ago, this Little Caesars, I'm quite sure some of them went in to get some pizza, and now it's on fire at this point. It's just unbelievable to see it.
Julian, stay with us if you can. I wonder, as firefighters work to get this blaze under control, who's watching their back?
It doesn't seem to be any police officers, out here with them. But as I said, there's no protesters that I see that are being aggressive toward the firefighters. It's just people out here sort of looking on, taking this all in. Firefighters, they're allowing them to do their job. I don't think anybody's really interfering with them at this point. There's a lot of media out here trying to get shots. So it's okay for them at this point. Wait. Was that the Walgreens? Yeah. We did see some looting happening at a nearby Aaron's. The Walgreens that's across the street from the Aaron's, that's now full of smoke. It was full of smoke a little bit earlier. We were getting reports that was on fire. There's a person that just ran out of there as well.
A big question: did St. Louis County prosecutors take it easy on Darren Wilson during his grand jury testimony?
During a news conference today, civil rights attorney Benjamin Crump claimed the grand jury transcripts show prosecutors failed to hold the Ferguson police officer accountable for shooting Michael Brown. News 4 Investigates' Craig Cheatham has been digging through piles of testimony since it was released last night by County Prosecutor Bob McCullough. Craig.
Sharon, the grand jury heard 70 hours of testimony, including several hours from Officer Darren Wilson.
You had to scratch your head, kind of like we all did, to say, when is the prosecutor going to cross-examine the killer of an unarmed person?
Attorney Benjamin Crump says St. Louis County prosecutors took it easy on Darren Wilson when he testified before the grand jury.
A first-year law student would have did a better job of cross-examining a killer of an unarmed person than the prosecutor's office did.
We looked at Wilson's grand jury testimony and had questions too. In some cases, the prosecutors asked leading questions or pursued clarification, seemingly in a non-confrontational way. Question: and it was your opinion that you needed to pull out your weapon because... Why did you feel that way? I don't want to put words in your mouth. The next question was, you thought he could hit you and it would be a fatal injury? Later, while the prosecutor was showing the grand jury photos of Wilson's face, allegedly injured by Brown, the prosecutor asked Wilson if there were any more of those photos you want us to see.
I mean, where was it vetted? Where was his veracity ever challenged? Where was his credibility ever challenged?
I think Mr. Crump's remarks reveal a fundamental misunderstanding of the difference between a grand jury proceeding and a trial.
Eric Zond is the prosecutor for Platte County, Missouri.
During a grand jury proceeding, as a prosecutor, I want to get every piece of information I can from any witness. At trial is the time, once I've decided that somebody might be guilty, that's the time to go after somebody and cross-examine them.
Zahn says the goal of a good prosecutor is to ask open-ended questions that allow the witness, especially a defendant, to create a longer, more detailed version of the event. Then ask follow-up questions that clarify certain points, which is what the county prosecutor did during the questioning of Darren Wilson. The grand jury had investigated other cases before probing Wilson's actions, and since it's extremely rare for a defendant to testify, it's possible that Wilson was the first defendant who testified before them in any case, and he testified for several hours.
I have no doubt that the fact that Darren Wilson testified before that grand jury certainly had an impact on those grand jurors, because it doesn't happen in very many situations.
Yesterday, after deliberating for 2 days and hearing evidence for 3 months, the grand jury decided again to not indict Darren Wilson. You can see the grand jury records and photographs on our website at KMOV.com. Live in the newsroom, Craig Cheatham, News 4.
Now that criticism, it has fallen on the shoulders of Governor Jay Nixon for the destruction of property in the wake of the announcement that no charges would be filed against Officer Darren Wilson.
Now, some say he should have deployed more National Guard troops much sooner. News 4's Steve Savard spoke with the governor today about those criticisms. Steve.
Jasmine and Sharon, I met with the governor behind the scenes of the Unified Command Post in Ferguson, where I asked him the question most people are wondering. Why weren't more National Guard troops deployed in more visible fashion Monday night?
We did have the Guard deployed. As everybody knows, we had about 700 guardsmen in static locations out there guarding things like power stations and fire stations. I think once we saw that dramatic reaction that night after the announcement, we upped force strength, obviously.
But I asked the governor if a more aggressive approach with the guardsmen could have minimized the damage done following the grand jury announcement.
Every day you get up the next day and wonder what you could have done different the day before. But that's not the point. The point is that working together with Unified Command, with the Guard here in the region, we laid out a plan. We had to uptick resources on the second day of that. And last night, while there was still a lot of activity, clearly we saw some movements forward.
I met with the governor in a tightly orchestrated event where he came to thank the men and women working to keep the area safe. But some area leaders, like Ferguson Mayor James Knowles, claim the governor is out of touch.
I have not spoken to the governor since maybe the third week of August directly. So, many of these issues I realize and recognize they are regional issues. However, they have been unfortunately put squarely on the shoulders of the city of Ferguson. Even last night, much of the destruction occurred outside of the city limits of the city of Ferguson. So I do recognize that this is a regional issue. However, as the eyes of the world are on the city of Ferguson, and as Ferguson continues to be the name of what goes on here, I would appreciate being kept in the loop a little better.
I asked the governor why he hasn't met directly with the mayor.
I do what I have time to do, and I do it in a way that I think that it's appropriate. We'll look forward to continuing to reach out to a lot of folks here.
The president has weighed in about the rising racial tensions in the area.
The problem is not just a Ferguson problem, it is an American problem.
I asked the governor if the White House or Attorney General Eric Holder had made any demands or even suggestions regarding the initial police response to protests.
I have been in touch with them and talked to them, but the bottom line is I'm the governor of the state, and we've just been keeping them apprised of what we're doing to make sure that we're reacting appropriately.
Maybe the most vocal critic of Nixon is his second in command in the state. Lieutenant Governor Peter Kinder, speaking to a cable network, said the governor is to blame for the violence in Ferguson Monday night.
It's sad when folks want to use politics in something like public safety. And I will tell you that the folks I'm working with, I don't know what party they are. I do know that they're here to make the people safe, and that when politicians try to use politics about this, it is irrelevant to the mission we have here. The folks that are the peace officers that are sworn behind me that are going out tonight, and going out this afternoon, as well as the National Guardsmen that are going to be away from their families on Thanksgiving to protect people. Those are the folks I'm focused on, not some chattering politician sitting on the sidelines.
Nixon says the National Guardsmen will continue to be deployed as they were last night, and he even says additional resources will be added if it's deemed necessary.
More outrage tonight as the Ferguson Commission held its third meeting in 3 weeks. But tonight, some of that outrage was directed right at the commission. Our Matt Cesney was there. And Matt, what was this all about?
Well, Jasmine, some in the crowd here tonight who have been attending all these Ferguson Commission meetings seem to have tired to some degree over how these meetings are being held. And here tonight at St. Louis University, at least early on, some of that frustration came out. This time, the Ferguson Commission got an earful about what it is they're doing.
Honestly, folks, man, that's on this panel waited too long to get involved with this. I mean, we should have been going through this weeks ago.
The panel, appointed by the governor to delve into the racial issues facing all of the St. Louis area, was taken to task.
We are here because we want answers. We're not here to listen to you speak. We've heard all the statistics. We've been a part of these statistics.
For the third meeting, commissioners this time changed tactics to avoid some of the loud and rowdy outbursts that occurred in previous meetings by limiting speakers and breaking the crowd up into small groups.
Never let it be about the people. You
When tempers did calm, the commission did seem to get more input, especially on how local courts operate. Many used words like corrupt and greedy as cities pile on fines.
You might go to court and fight against some type of violation, and they might dismiss it, but they may make you pay court costs, and sometimes the court cost is outrageous. And it varies by municipality.
What's interesting here is that the city of Ferguson a couple of months ago actually did reform its municipal court system. This Ferguson Commission, however, is taking a look at the entire St. Louis region, and they will be doing it at their own pace. We're live in Midtown. Matt Cesny, News 4.
This is a community effort to reach out and meet the needs of the people.
I'm trying to get back to doing math and getting all my A's.
I've never seen St. Louis come together and stand up for a cause like this.
We want to show the community that we're here to support them.